We've run all the simulations, and the output always shows that Graham, Randall, Jimmy, and Billy are full of it.
You know, I'm not very smart, but I thought Jimmy was smarter than that.
Here is Texas, we make folks put up or shut up. It's a Southern thing. Jason is just asking for you to defend yourself. Be a man.
It's so exciting. One of these guys is going to take the bait, and Jason is going to humiliate them with data. We are going to see Jason destroy one of these guys.
A few call-outs was interesting, but now this situation has a lot of people's attention. Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson, Billy Carson, Jimmy Corsetti, the Ancient Aliens crew, and the many who produce for Gaia, and no one will debate Jason. Archaix must be the truth.
Just call it for what it is. Ancient aliens, Gaia, ancient apocalypse, bright insight, forbidden knowledge. It's all Hollywood. Fake as a doll being able to talk.
Holy crap, first Billy and now Jimmy?
Man, I don't know nothing about all this whack stuff, but I'm just enjoying the show.
Sometimes you have to pay attention. A strategist sees a checkmate coming. Don't make the mistake of doubling down, because the public will never forgive you after you were given a chance to admit your error.
I'm sorry, we've run ops on Jason, blocked his accounts, throttled down his likes, unsubbed his followers over and over, removed a lot of his posts, and even messed with his bandwidth, and still nothing has slowed down his momentum.
Listen, I don't read books, but neither does Jimmy or Billy, and Hancock has other people write his books. But I listen to Archaix, and I can hear the truth because he's always making sense and telling me where the knowledge comes from.
Is so dumb. Hancock and Randall are so old, and Billy and Jimmy just hating because Jason is hot. So dumb, it's not even about Atlantis.
You mean to tell me that the original discoverers of the Rachette structure even said it wasn't Atlantis after they went there and had a look?
Jason is a true thriller of information. He has shown these guys that they can just beat it. Archaix for the win.
Oh my God, guys, Men in Black was just a movie. You guys took it to the next level, and now you're running from Archaix to save your bank accounts?
I can't believe this. Jimmy, I looked up to you. My next song was going to be about Atlantis in the Sahara. I was going to flow, dude.
Archaix has gone way beyond what is necessary to prove that these guys are all putting out some real, easily disproven information, and that they have made fortunes doing it. Jason has shown us who values the dollar and who values the truth.
So I wanted to endorse Archaix, but Jason told me cram it. He apparently hates politicians. Still, break free or die trying, guys.
There is no way I would want to be one of these guys. I listened to Jason freestyle historical facts in Las Vegas like he had lived back then. A freaking time traveler.
This whole situation raises the question of accountability. These guys have made millions off of telling the public incorrect information that they now refuse to answer for. We may need to look into this.
Oh, you guys get it all wrong. It means make Archaix great again. That's MAGA. Errands of the Archaix nation.
There is no way in hell someone is going to use my past against me because they don't want to deal with me right now. That shit's weak.
Atlantis, dated to the Ice Age, is as dumb as thinking a guy who invents computer viruses can make vaccines.
This isn't going away. Jason's not going to win because he's smarter. He's going to win because you're being dumb. Like me.
Being a crusader for the truth isn't being a bully. Only someone trying to hide something is going to gaslight you into hating on Jason.
There is no stopping Archaix. Gaia, Ancient Aliens, Forbidden Knowledge of Billy, Bright Insight of Jimmy, Ancient Apocalypse of Hancock. I'm telling you, they aren't ready.
Dudes, what are you going to do when Jason has 500,000 followers? You already can't contain this.
Atlantis down. So Solon said to the priests, okay, when did this happen? And they said, quite matter-of-factly, 9,000 years ago. That's in 600 BC. Do the math.
It's a date in our calendar. That's 9,600 BC. That's 11,600 years ago.
Why don't you mention about that particular date, 11,600?
Well, it's incredibly important. It's an incredibly important date because the Younger Dryas begins 12,800 years ago with a cataclysm, with a puzzling, mysterious rise in sea level at the same point, 1,000 years of freezing temperatures, mass extinctions of animal species all over the world, and then 11,600 years ago, global temperature shoots up. The last of the ice caps collapse into the sea. Sea level rises enormously. That is the date that work starts at Göbekli Tepe, and it's a point I've made many times, but it's really worth making because archaeologists roll their eyes every time you say the word Atlantis. But that is precisely the date that Plato, which is the earliest surviving reference to Atlantis, that's precisely the date he gives for the destruction of Atlantis. And as we look into it further, we find something else, that Plato puts a date on the destruction of Atlantis. He says Atlantis was submerged beneath the waves in a huge global cataclysm 9,000 years before the time of Solon. That gives us an absolute date for this. Then Solon asks, when did this happen? And the priests say, they're very relaxed about it. They say, 9,000 years ago. So immediately we have a date that we can put to our calendar. 600 BC, he makes the visit. 9,000 years before that, that's 9,600 BC. Give or take 23 years, that is 11,600 years ago. That's when Göbekli Tepe is built. That's when Meltwater Pulse 1b begins to flood the world oceans. And again, my critics will niggle away at the edges of this and say, well, Meltwater Pulse 1b unfolded over 300 or 400 years. If you average it out, it wasn't that much in any one year. But who says it happened at average rates? Who says there wasn't a big rise and then a smaller rise? You know? These things are very annoying. So Solon said to the priests, okay, when did this happen? And they said, quite matter-of-factly, 9,000 years ago. Quite matter-of-factly, 9,000 years ago. 9,000 years ago. Plato repeatedly states that it is a true story. And as we look into it further, we find something else, that Plato puts a date on the destruction of Atlantis. He says Atlantis was submerged beneath the waves in a huge global cataclysm 9,000 years before the time of Solon. And Solon asked those Egyptian priests, when did this happen? And they said, 9,000 years ago. Well, do the math. That's in 600 BC. That's 9,000 years before 600 BC. We call that 9,600 BC. That's 11,600 years ago. That's exactly the date of the end of the Younger Dryas, and it's exactly the date of what is called Meltwater Pulse 1b, one of the biggest single rises overnight in sea level that ever occurred. So if Plato made it up, it's really weird that he picked a date that is precisely a date that coincides with the latest geological evidence on cataclysmic sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age. Plato is the earliest surviving reference we have to this great lost civilization of prehistory that he referred to as Atlantis. The source, the earliest surviving source for the tradition of Atlantis, is the highly respected figure of Plato. And he passes it down to us in dialogues called the Timaeus and the Critias.
I got hit with an EMP, guys. Before there was ever thunder, lightning knocked all the power out in the area. I'm on generator, but I got a pretty good mic. You can't hear the generator. It took me an extra 5 minutes. Had to put an octane booster in the generator. I got a generator that goes for 11 hours nonstop. It's pretty good. Very few times have I ever had to use it that long. So I got my front lines hat on. You already know what this is about. And you know what? I'm singling out Graham Hancock because of this book, which literally started a movement in the wrong direction. However, Andrew Collins is guilty of it. Robert Schoch, Robert Bauval, Tellinger. There's so many copycats out there. There's so many people using the wrong information and putting out there as if it's fact. Listen, you guys know I do not embellish. I'm going to go through the facts in this video, and yes, it's going to hurt some feelings. There are thousands of publications and even tens of thousands of videos put out in the last 30 years since Fingerprints of the Gods was published, and they all borrowing from the same mistakes Graham Hancock made. Can you imagine the immense amount of wealth that has been acquired by hundreds of people for just copying mistakes Graham Hancock made? Oh, he made them. And I'm never going to sit here and try to cram something down your throat, because in all my videos, all I want you to do is use your head, use your common sense. I'm going to give you the facts. You know what? Your opinions are your own. So that's one of the new Archaix stickers. I've had this hat for a long time. It's a good one. It's a good one. Call this studio my tank. So it's a shame that somebody as prestigious as Graham Hancock has nothing when it comes to Atlantis dating, except for one single obscure reference to a 9,000 years before Solon, which we've covered ad nauseum in Archaix. All my Archaix veterans know. You already know it's 9,000 moons. It is ridiculous. So let me remove that from studio. Share my screen. We have an errant ad, but first we're gonna clear the air on that. Before we start Fingerprints of the Gods, we are forever completely dismiss the Atlantis narrative as the Ice Age. We're gonna get that out of the field right now, because it's so dumb. It is so dumb, Jimmy. Quit copying that man's mistakes. Quit worshiping Jimmy Corsetti. Quit worshiping Graham Hancock. The man made nothing but errors and mistakes, and you're going to see them. Jimmy ever comes around, I'll buy a mistake. Let's see. All right. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to go through these fast because this doesn't even really have much to do with Fingerprints of the Gods. But you know, Graham Hancock is not educated in chronological matters at all, as will be revealed in this video. But he's not the only one. This book was published in 1722. This book, I've talked about it a lot. We're not going to go into it a lot, but the scholars of 1753 published this one, Chronological Antiquities, John Jackson, one of my favorite chronologists, right here. If Graham Hancock's researcher, because he doesn't research his own books, even in Fingerprints of the Gods, Graham Hancock specifically mentions in this book that he has a researcher who quit on him while he was putting this book together. I wonder why that man quit. I would have too. Tried to get me to say some bullshit. But these books are very old. And in these books, this research is amazing. One of these scholars said that the most ancient computations for days for years among the Chaldeans is no different than months for years among the Egyptians. Warranted by the testimony of writers of the greatest credit and most conversant in the histories and antiquities of the nations. What this means is that the Egyptians never told Solon 9,000 solar years. It was 9,000 years in the concept of the Egyptians, which was every 30 days was a year. This isn't just John Jackson and long livers. We have it on the many historic scholars came to these conclusions, even 2,000 years ago. Having treated fully on the most ancient years and shown that the original year of all nations was lunisolar and consisted of 360 days, and how the solar lunar periods were by degrees improved and perfected, and by intercalations made to correspond with each other. Before I proceed to the Egyptian antiquities and chronology, it is necessary to show that in the most ancient times preceding the Noahic flood and after it, the Egyptians reckoned the reigns of their fabulous gods and demigods by years of single lunar periods only, or of 30 days. You can't make this stuff up. It puts Atlantis in the 13th century BC, not 9,000 years before Solon. Again, in long livers, Some of those who, with Job, say that man comes forth like a flower and dies as soon as born, maintain that this long course of years of the ancients was regulated by the lunary movement of 29 or 30 days. 30 days was a year. Long Livers, 1722. Chapter 6, concerning the Greek Olympiads. From reading Lactantius and Plutarch and the life of Numa and the second king of Rome, might be insinuated that the year of the ancients was no longer duration than one of our months, or at most one of our 4 seasons. The Chaldeans and the Arcadians follow this use, as well as some other people, of whom Macrobius speaks in the 12th chapter of his book, Saturnalia. Can't get around it, guys. You just can't get around it. Real quick, I want to remind you of the scholar Otto Silbermann in 1930, who said Plato's dating of the rise and fall of Atlantis 9,000 years before Solon's time could be dismissed right away. If such a civilization had existed, it would have been entirely forgotten long before the rise of Egypt. Okay, we already saw that one. Let's go to the next. All right. The Egyptians reckoned a month for a year in the first ages of the world, and in the reigns of their fabulous kings, whom they called gods and demigods. This computation enables us to understand perfectly the oldest Egyptian chronology, and to reduce it to a very near and exact conformity with the sacred chronology of Scripture. Graham Hancock in his book, Fingerprints of the Gods, has an actual statement in there trying to say that these inflated years of 23,000 and 36,000 that you see in the Egyptian Turin papyrus and the Palermo stone are absolute proof that the biblical chronology is wrong. Graham Hancock's lying. I'm going to show you. It's not a mistake. It's a lie. There's a huge difference. I'm going to show it to you. All right, Marcus Varro that knew that the Egyptians had anciently reckoned the lives of men by a lunar year of 30 days. Marcus Varro, ancient Roman historian, cited in over 40 different ancient chronologies, books, monographs. His work was very well known in the ancient times. He says that the Egyptians counted a year as 30 days. But when they computed by this year, they represented the lives of the first deified men to consist of many thousands and sometimes myriads of years. Thus, Manetho reckons the reign of Vulcan, the oldest Egyptian god, to be 9,000 years, which Africanus observes were resolved by historians into months, as they were undoubtedly to be understood. Hear that thunder and lightning out there? This way of reckoning by lunar years of a month was used only in computing times of the gods and the demigods to the flood, and the times of the heroes and mere mortal kings who reigned after were computed by solar years, and never used lunar years in reckoning the particular reigns of their heroes and their kings, who were esteemed mere men. To them, the Great Flood was the cataclysm. Graham Hancock puts this flood in the Younger Dryas period in the Ice Age. We're going to show that's total BS. It's all wrong. What Graham Hancock is showing you and trying to present to you with his Atlantis dating and his Younger Dryas model that we're going to get into in Fingerprints of the Gods is a complete violates the reason why scholarship totally ignores Graham Hancock. They can't take him seriously. Here is the entire archaeological, anthropological, traditional, and textual history of Sumer, Egypt, India, the Maya, and the Chinese, the oldest large empire civilizations. Here's where they were. After 3500 BC, they all exploded onto the scene. This is the recorded historical model. This is recorded human history right here to 2023 when I drew this chart. Now, what Hancock is proposing is that 8,000 years before the actual story of Atlantis in the 13th century BC by the Egyptian dating lunar reckoning, the actual 9,000 years was solar years of Solon, putting Atlantis way back here at 9,500 BC. Why would he date it that way? He would date it that way because he's trying to promote that the cataclysm was in the Younger Dryas Ice Age period, even though the historical account of Plato shows it was 13th century BC. How do we know? It's real simple. Show you another chart. I'm just going through this. My Archaix veterans have all seen all this. We know it's real easy. No, not that one. Here's a chart right here. Elements of Plato's Atlantis narrative make 9,500 BC an impossible theory off by 8,000 years. The reason is because the elements mentioned in the Atlantis story of Plato that have to be ignored in order to push a Ice Age dating. The earliest canal works, 4,000 BC. Domestication of horses, very important in the Atlantis story, 3,500 BC. Iron tools first implemented, 2,500 BC. This is the very earliest. I've been very, very liberal with these dates. 1250 BC, Poseidon enslaved to build Troy's walls. This is the Sea People's Federation armies. The oldest winged horse, Pegasus relief, is known and dated to this period. 1229 BC, Poseidon attacks Troy. Sea Peoples attack Egypt and Anatolia. 1271 BC, Egypt attacks the Philistines, who were of the Sea People's Federation. 1275 BC was the famous Battle of Kadesh. 1340 BC is 9,000 moons before the Egyptians told Solon the Atlantis story. 1375 BC as Athens is founded. Athens is integral to the Atlantis story because the Atlanteans were at war against Athens. So please ask Graham Hancock why he omitted all references to the Greek war of Athens and the Atlanteans when promoting his bullshit theory that Atlantis is the Ice Age 9,500 BC date. That is a deliberate lie. You can't even make a mistake that bad. The whole war was against Athens. Every single historian of Mediterranean antiquities will tell you that Athens was founded in Attica about the 14th or 13th century BC. The Atlantis period, according to the 9,000 lunar years of Solon. It's just ridiculous. What's really ridiculous is that I even have to say all this. It's amazing, man. What people will just hold on to this misinformation and ride with it, and it becomes hero worship. People are worshiping People are worshiping Graham Hancock, not even processing the fact that everything out of this book is misinformation. I'm going to show it to you. Worshiping the shit out of this man. I don't get it. Ask Jimmy Corsetti because he does. He understands it. Jimmy, if you had enough bricks, you'd probably build Graham a temple. So before we close the Atlantis deal and really get started on this book, you have to know ancient authorities on Plato's 9,000 years actually being 9,000 moons. This isn't Jason cherry picking a few ancient citations from books. The evidence is overwhelming that Graham Hancock is completely gaslighting you. The priests of Neath at Saith who related the Atlantis story only employed a lunar calendar. I will show you those books in this presentation. Eudoxus of Cnidos in Plato's own day corrected the 9,000 years as 9,000 moons. Eudoxus of Cnidos, Lactantius, Plutarch, Macrobius, Eusebius, and many others all knew the ancient Egyptians reckoned a month as a year. There is no way Mr. Hancock, Randall Carlson, Andrew Collins, all these guys that have these sensationalist-ass histories, none of them can get around these facts. Diodorus Siculus wrote, it was customary to reckon the year by the lunar cycle, since the year consisted of 30 days. It was not impossible for some men to live 1,200 years. I know this. I'm 19, right as of right now, I'm 19,000 Shars old today. Go figure that one out. Anybody new to my channel has no idea what I'm talking about, but my Archaix veterans do. I'm 19,000 Shars old. Manetho's 9,000 years was corrected by Africanus as 9,000 months. 13th century BC, when canals were in use, when iron was being used in warfare, when Poseidon worship was at its height. Poseidon worship involved the winged Pegasus. What was a winged Pegasus? It is a memory of horse sacrifice when they ran a white horse off of a cliff into the ocean as a sacrifice to the god Poseidon. It was a winged horse because the horse flew through the air to die when it hit the water. That's Poseidon worship. And last thing we'll look at here, historic scholars who wrote the 9,000 years was months. Again, Jason's not cherry picking. The scholar Thomas Bradderween in the year 1340 AD, having access to books and research materials that no longer exist, concluded that Plato's 9,000 years was actually lunar reckoning. Historian Robert Argaud, about 1340 BC is the date of Atlantis, and he even links it to the Sea People's Federation. Pierre Dialy, he dates Atlantis at 1370 BC. 9,000 years was lunar reckoning system. In the year 1572, the chronologist Pedro Sarmiento Galboa wrote that 9,000 years of Solon was in reference to a lunar counting system, not years. Why didn't Graham Hancock ever cite any of this material? Why was it completely ignored when he steadily pushed? We have it on authority that Solon, who was in 600 BC, was told by the Egyptians that Atlantis was 9,000 years earlier. Do the math. It's very simple. Why didn't Graham Hancock, when he was pontificating all this BS, cite all this? It's very well established. Well, another one of my favorite authors that I've done a whole video on one of his books is Eugenius Philolethes, 1721. On Babylonian and ancient Greek calendars, they were all moon count systems. I've quoted him. I should have gotten more quotes out of Philolethes. They wouldn't have fit on this page, though. Sir Isaac Newton, who is also a renowned chronologist who wrote Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms in the year 1740, concluded that the Egyptians exaggerated the 9,000 and had been caught doing this many times. Chronologist John Jackson, I showed you the title page of his book, 1752 in Chronological Antiquities, wrote that Egyptian years were months. That's enough. That's enough right there. I can go on, but it's enough. It's overkill. It's overkill. There is no excuse for anyone any longer to promote the idea that Atlantis is 9,500, 9,600 BC. From this point forward, anybody doing that is gaslighting the hell out of you or deliberately lying. There is no way that this information is not getting more and more widespread. I've been seeing it on platforms everywhere in the comment section. I've been seeing people post my charts. I've been hearing from people who've been emailing Graham Hancock groups, Graham Hancock personally. All these guys, Jimmy Corsetti, they already know. They know, guys. Don't let them gaslight you into believing that they hadn't heard any of this material. I have been freely posting it to the public for 3 years. Yeah, they're gaslighting you. So that's my intro. That's how deep we're going to go in this video. That's my intro right there. And let's go ahead and look in the description box, and you can check out. We have a very unique errant ad today. Somebody I'm showcasing. Let's check this. Let's check out this little ad right now. Let me stop sharing. Video file. I thought this was pretty cool because I wish more people would do this with more books. For real. Man, I thought that was cool. So, you can pre-order these books. The information's in the description box. That's the Elder Edda. Somebody had also done one and told me about it. And a friend of mine on Facebook. I've been kicked off Facebook, so I don't have access to him anymore. I don't know what happened to him, but he hasn't reached out by email, I don't think. I've been waiting for Tom. He designed a very similar book just like this on Beowulf, and I showed it to you guys. Beautifully bound book on Beowulf. It's amazing. This is in the same vein. It looks like the same thing. You can see in the description box. It gets you a copy of the Elder Edda. I believe I will do the same because I need to add that to my library. I do not have a copy of the Elder Edda. I have Snorri Sturluson, Volsunga Saga, Mabine. I can't even pronounce it. The Welsh epic, Mabinogion, or I can't pronounce it. But the Weird of the Gods, Ragnarok. But yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. All right. Let me share my screen. We'll be doing a lot of sharing here. We will be doing a lot of sharing. So, share my screen again. Yeah, man. So, guys, Graham Hancock is not a chronologist by any stretch of the imagination. He has no knowledge whatsoever on various methods of ancient cultures, how they counted and factored time, their concepts attached to time. This is a problem. This is the problem I have with Graham Hancock. Rather than doing it the Archaix method, reading a book from cover to cover, and then if some of the information is no good, okay, big deal. But you did. But I do glean good things, and I take my own notes. Graham Hancock, on the other hand, has not read these books. Instead, his researchers go through indexes and they look up Atlantis, put 14, 15 books aside, and go through everything that these 14, 15 books say on Atlantis, and then turn around and come up with his own information. Or Göbekli Tepe, or the precessional cycle, zodiac, age of Leo, all this stuff. This is how Graham Hancock's researchers are doing. They are not reading these books cover to cover. The Archaix method is to read all books cover to cover and then put the information where it goes into the Archaix paradigm. I've been demonstrating this since the inception of my channel. My channel is only 5 years old. I've also been demonstrating it in a dozen published books that go back to 2006. My method is foolproof. This is why my books are packed with bibliographic citations from works that I've actually read, and this is why I can get on YouTube and sit here and extrapolate and elucidate on all kinds of concepts and give you exact dates and tell you even the time between different dates in history, why it's relevant to us today. It's because I've actually done the work. Huge difference between myself and these internet, Facebook-educated researchers who watch videos to put their material together. This is why they won't debate. They know their position, and it's a very weak one at that. So Hancock has a further problem with his inability to process chronological information. And a lot of people are like that. They automatically assume that every time they come across a year, a month, any type of modern time designator, they automatically impose their modern day understanding upon an ancient system. You cannot interpret ancient calendars by using the modern 365.25 day year. It does not work. It doesn't work. I have shown this ad nauseum on my channel. I will give some demonstrations here. Let's go to page 383 of Graham's material. Where's page 383? Let's check it out. So, page 383, Fingerprints of the Gods. We're going to be looking at a lot of material, guys. Citing Manetho directly. Eusebius begins by reeling off a list of the gods, which consists essentially of the familiar Aeneid of Heliopolis: Ra, Osiris, Isis, Horus, Set, and so on. Now, this is a quote from Eusebius. These are the first to hold sway in Egypt. Therefore, the kingship passed from one to another in unbroken succession through 13,900 years. After the gods, demigods reigned for 1,255 years. And again, another line of kings held sway for 1,817 years. Then came 30 more kings, reigning for 1,790 years. And then again, 10 kings ruled for 350 years. There followed the rule of the spirits of the dead for 5,813 years. Now, this is Christian Roman author Eusebius quoting the Egyptian scholar Manetho, who mentioned all of this in designations of years. Hancock writes, the total of all these periods adds up to 24,925 years and takes us far beyond the biblical date for the creation of the world, sometime in the 5th millennium BC. So, the problem with this is that this total sum right here that Hancock is showing, the total sum here is actually only 2,077 years. I wrote it in the margin. The total sum by Manetho's lunar reckoning. Remember, Manetho was another one that told us that the Egyptians counted by moons. Their years were 30 days. 2,077 years is the actual way to interpret the king list of Egypt. Starting from Manetho's time, that means that the reigns of kings literally go back to the 23rd century BC, not 9,500, 9,600 BC. They go back to the exact biblical date of the flood. It's exactly where they go back. You have been gaslit. So, what page was that? 383. So, now let's look at the next page, 384, because I know there's a huge distinction between claiming somebody made a mistake and claiming somebody is actively deceiving you. So the very next page, I'm going to show you why I'm claiming Hancock is deceiving you. This is not a simple mistake. This will be page 3. That was 383. This will be page 384. Diodorus Siculus and Herodotus. Okay. In this assertion, Manetho finds much support among classical writers. In the 1st century BC, for example, the Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, this is in Fingerprints of the Gods. In the 1st century BC, for example, the Greek historian Diodorus Siculus visited Egypt. He is rightly described by C.H. Oldfather, his most recent translator, as an uncritical compiler who used good sources and reproduced them faithfully. Graham Hancock is endorsing a scholar who endorses Diodorus Siculus. Pay attention. In plain English, what this means is that Diodorus did not try to impose his prejudices and preconceptions on the material he collected. He is therefore particularly valuable to us because his informants included Egyptian priests whom he questioned about the mysterious past of their country. This is what they told him. At the first, gods and heroes ruled Egypt for a little less than 18,000 years. The last of the gods to rule being Horus, the son of Isis. Mortals have been kings of their country, they say, for a little less than 5,000 years. So, Graham Hancock continues. Let us review these figures uncritically and see what they add up to. Diodorus was writing in the 1st century BC. If we journey back from there for the 5,000 years during which the mortal kings supposedly ruled, we get to around 5100 BC. If we go even further back to the beginning of the age of heroes and gods, we find that we have arrived at 23,100 BC, when the world was still firmly in the grip of the last ice age. Who told this guy to mention ice age? What is going on here? I'm going to show you what's going on. He just endorsed Diodorus Siculus. Without actually continuing on with what Diodorus Siculus actually said. Uh-oh. Hancock, you're in trouble. All right, so I need to look up Plato real quick. All right. So, can I remind you the 3rd paragraph or the 3rd statement? Diodorus Siculus wrote, it was customary to reckon the year by the lunar cycle, since the year consisted of 30 days. It was not impossible for some men to live 1,200 years. How did Graham Hancock miss this statement? He cited Diodorus Siculus. He endorsed Diodorus Siculus. By Diodorus Siculus's own reckoning, though, we have a problem, because 23,100 BC is not the date of Diodorus. The full timeline is 1,925 solar years. That's 23,100 lunar years. Diodorus was merely using the Egyptian system, 1,925 years. Guess what that means? It means basically what Manetho said. Right after the 23rd, 22nd, 21st century BC, in that area right there is when Egyptian history began. Here it is. You can't make this stuff up. It's Fingerprints of the Grift. All right, let's get. Just can't make this stuff up. You have to understand, guys, why this is critical. Hundreds of books have made hundreds of millions of dollars for publishers, agents, and authors, book distributors, book chains. Everybody's involved in the grift. You know how much money has changed hands? How much money was taken from the public that thought they were buying the truth? Yeah, it's one thing to make a mistake. It's another thing to make 50 mistakes in the same book. But it's another thing to be shown direct evidence of willful deceit. Hancock acknowledges, though, that Herodotus mentions the 4 times the sun changed position in the sky and rose where it now sets. We talk about this in Archaix frequently when we're discussing Immanuel Velikovsky, who Graham Hancock won't dare to mention. We'll get to that too. But then Hancock goes on straight gaslighting the reader on page 385. Let me show you 385. I didn't take a picture of it, but on page 385, he says that Herodotus didn't really, that's why I didn't take a picture of it. There's nothing to see. He's gaslighting you. We know what Herodotus said about the 4 times the sun changed direction, and that the Egyptians didn't trust the sun, so they counted by moons, lunar reckoning. Graham Hancock is saying that's not what it means. He's gaslighting you. Graham Hancock says that on page 385 of Fingerprints of the Gods, he specifically states that Herodotus didn't really mean it that way. that he was actually talking about the equinoxes and precession. Total gaslight. I'm going to show you. And to hammer it in a little bit, he even cites a very controversial mystic and mathematician, an occultist named Schwaller de Lubix, who also said the same thing, that Herodotus was probably just talking about the vernal equinox and the solstices and all that. It's so dumb. Being dumb is not my opinion. It's dumb because of what Herodotus continues to say that Graham Hancock doesn't quote. Let me show you. So Hancock is pointing to the precession of the equinox, a phenomenon, but this causes two very glaring problems. Herodotus in 450 BC in his massive book, The Histories, not once mentions the zodiac. Not once. Aries, Cancer, Taurus, Libra, Pisces, Scorpio, Virgo, Sagittarius, none of these constellations, none of this is mentioned in Herodotus. This is considered by scholarship the father of history. Herodotus knew of no precessional system. He knew of no zodiac in existence other than lunar zodiacs that only involved the moon and didn't involve the constellations that we know today. The second problem with this passage and Hancock's interpretation of it is that Hancock deliberately misquotes Herodotus. The actual text reads, this is in the Histories, Book 2. This is in the Histories, Book 2, Section 142. It reads, during this time, they said the sun had moved 4 times from his accustomed course, rising twice where he now sets and setting twice where he now rises, and that nothing in Egypt had changed, neither from the rising of the Nile nor the respect of disease or death. The sun set where it rises and the sun rose where it set. 4 different incidents of the sun changing its direction in recorded human history. Any one of these events forever changes all archaeoastronomy, all computer simulations, all astrological simulations from that date and forward into the past. Because you don't know what the sky looked like prior to that date because the sun changed everything. So Hancock, he misleads the readers by not explaining what Herodotus says about the sun moving in the opposite direction, that the Egyptian priest told him that this phenomenon occurred over a span of 11,340 years. There is no way the Egyptians were talking about the sun being at the equinoctial and at the solstitial points. Over 11,300, they weren't talking about that. Hancock's gaslighting you. They're talking about in the recorded Egyptian history of 11,340 years, which is reduced by a year being 30 days according to the cycle. The Egyptians were telling Herodotus that every 945 years the sun changes direction. That's what the whole passage is about. Hancock made up the precession, the equinox, the solstitial has nothing to do with that passage at all. And because the sun stopping in the sky is something in the historical record, because the sun changing directions is in the historical record, we do have accounts, we have traditions, we have ancient writers that talk about this. The Egyptians wanted to clarify that in Egypt, when this happened, we didn't have flooding and earthquakes and disasters like other nations report. Here, the Nile kept flowing. Here, it was still relatively peaceful. So, yeah, total gaslighting. You can see it for yourselves. You can see it for yourselves, guys. In Fingerprints of the Gods, page 385. Yeah, Hancock completely misquotes Herodotus and then turns around and doesn't finish the whole passage. So you don't know that the Egyptians were actually talking about a 945-year period. Yeah, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy. All right. I got some coffee runners. Here it is. Here it is. Yeah, this is big. This is way bigger than Hancock. This is way bigger than Hancock. There are whole franchises that have capitalized off all this misinformation. How many of you, your friends, people in your communities, people you know online in your online communities, how many people have invested money in all these books put out by all these guys that are full of shit? All of them. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Okay, so on page 411, of Fingerprints of the Gods, that it begins chapter 46 called the 11th millennium BC. On page 411, Hancock, he asserts that the long periods of time mentioned in the Turin Papyrus and the Palermo Stone, the two sources of chronology for Egyptian antiquities, the two periods that are mentioned are 23,000 years and 36,000 years. And it shows that the ancient Egyptians recorded that their Zep-Tepi, or the first time, like the pre-flood world, of Osiris was in the 11th millennium BC. This is a terribly anachronistic mistake for two reasons. It's another reason why scholars don't take Graham Hancock seriously. One, Egyptologists know that the cult of Osiris and Isis only appeared in the 18th to 15th centuries BC. There was no cult of Osiris or Isis or any Egyptian gods. There were no Egyptian pyramids. There were no temples. There was nothing in Egypt in the 11th millennium BC. Also, the Egyptian lunar reckoning places 23,000 and 36,000 to actually be, by Egyptian reckoning, only 1,916 years and a 3,000-year period, according to Eudoxus, Diodorus Siculus, and many others, Lactantius, Macrobius. How many I got to name? Philolethes. Yeah, it's ridiculous that this made it into publishing, about somebody even taking it seriously, that these sums of numbers are actual solar years, and then trying to endorse it by using a falsified processional system and a zodiac that didn't even exist prior to the 8th century BC, but using the zodiac to date things in the 11th millennium BC. That's what he does in Fingerprints of the Gods. We're going to take all that apart in this video. So, again, using Egyptian reckoning of the moon, these impossible numbers to the Western world, who didn't understand how Egyptians factored time, now make sense. Now we understand why ancient Egyptian texts talk about a 1,656-month period, because they knew of the importance of a 138-year cycle. Oh yeah, it's going down, guys. So it's not just Hancock. They are all in on the precession deception. So page 451, let's look at page 451. It's not just Hancock. Hancock and so many other modern authors who have these multi-million-dollar publishing contracts, very glossy, very high hardback books. They appear in libraries all over the world. Yeah, here it is right here. Here's a conversation that Graham Hancock had with Robert Bauval. This is on page 451 of Fingerprints of the Gods. A perverse thought occurred to me. This is Graham Hancock. How can we be so sure that the moment that they were freezing was 10,450 BC? After all, Orion's belt takes up the same configuration in the southern sky, west of the Milky Way, at 11 plus degrees above the horizon, once every 26,000 years. So why shouldn't they have been immortalizing 36,450 BC, or even the precessional cycle that began 26,000 years before that? Robert was clearly ready for this question. Robert Bovell responds, according to Graham Hancock, some ancient records do suggest that Egyptian civilization had roots going back almost 40,000 years. He mused. Like that strange report of Herodotus that talks about the sun rising where it once set and setting where it once rose. Graham Hancock, instead of correcting Bovell and saying, hey, Bovell, you're wrong, because I've already interpreted that as being the solstitial, that was a reference to the solstitial and the equinoctial points, and that Herodotus got his information wrong. They weren't talking about a big cycle with the sun changing its direction and all that. They were talking about the solstitial points and the equinoctial points. Instead of correcting Bovell, he just goes with it, which is also a processional metaphor. So, again, Robert Bovell, yes, precession again. Most peculiar, the way it always keeps cropping up. It only keeps cropping up because these men keep mentioning it. So we're gonna deal with it here. We're going to dissect and completely tear apart this whole processional theory. It's so ridiculous. This circular reason. What you just read is circular reasoning. It's just as dumb as uniformitarianism. Let's publish that these fossils are Triassic because they appear in Triassic geological strata. And then over here in Tanzania, we find the same type of rock. So we find the same type of fossils. And when we find those fossils, we're going to date them to we're going to date the rock they're found into the Triassic. Do you see what's wrong with this picture? This is exactly how the establishment science has dated everything. They have already arbitrarily decided how each layer of strata is how old they are. Then they assign the fossils found in them to that period. But when fossils are found in different types of rock, they go ahead and decide, well, that rock right there was just made from a different material, but it's still 75 million years old. It's so dumb. This is why parts are ignored. This is why Archaix is ignored, because I've showed hundreds of fossils on my channel that are impossible by that model. What you just listened to on page 451, this conversation between Hancock and Bovell, is cherry picking. Hancock did not correct Bovell on his gaslighting. I guess he didn't want to gaslight Bovell, so he just rode with it. Yeah, well, this is all processional metaphor. But yeah, the truth is Bovell's actually mentioning the Herodotus account of the sun moving in different directions in different times. Hancock turned around and contorts it into a processional metaphor. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. So the accurate interpretation for the Egyptian long numbers was the ancient Egyptian lunar model counting months for years, which the Greeks did not understand, being Westerners, and they thought the Egyptians were trying to tell them that their civilization was 13,000 years old. This is another reason scholarship totally ignores Graham Hancock. They already know these long, impossible numbers are not solar years. Hancock also accepted the mistakes of his predecessors without doing the math himself, and he asserted in Fingerprints of the Gods, he asserted that the Mayan calendar ends in 2012. Oh man, I know my Archaix veterans are rolling their eyes. Oh, there goes Jason on 2012 again. So here's page 121. Page 121 of Fingerprints of the Gods concerning the Olmecs. Here then was the first mystery of the Olmecs, a monumental piece of sculpture more than 2,000 years old, which portrayed a subject with unmistakable Negroid features. There were, of course, no African blacks in the New World 2,000 years ago, nor did any arrive until the slave trade began, well after the conquest. Graham Hancock needs to do his history because there were already African-type blacks in the New World in the days of the Olmec and the Maya. He is absolutely incorrect. We have friezes in Mayan that show black population at war with local indigenous Olmecs and Maya. We've even got some really harrowing pictures of Caucasians and blacks all chopped up body pieces on Mayan friezes. Hancock does not know what he's talking about. You will need to defer to David Hatcher Childress's Lost Cities books, where he shows pictures and he describes them, and even in his bibliographies he tells you where you can go find this material. Graham Hancock is in error. African type blacks have been in the Americas for a very long time. So and he goes back. Now he goes back to say, there is, however, firm paleoanthropological evidence that one of many different migrations into the Americas during the last ice age did consist of people of Negroid stock. You're being gaslit. Just connecting it to the ice age again. Being gaslit. So Hancock acknowledges that charcoals at the site of the Olmec heads produce scientific readings carbon dated to 1200 BC. This is exactly when the Olmecs occupied the site, as I've shown recently in my recent presentation. I believe it was wasn't it Archaix 4.0 episode 2, 1135 BC, Atlantis and the Olmecs. That's I just went through this recently in a video last week. So yeah, it's just crazy. So in Fingerprints of the Gods, Hancock in his book specifically gaslights the hell out of the reader, saying the charcoal associated with them proved only that the scriptures were at least as old as 1200 BC. The test did not set an upper limit on their antiquity. Are you hearing that? The test did not set an upper limit on their antiquity. That's gaslighting. The test did not say 5,000 or 8,000 years before. They said 1200 BC, which is the exact time scholarship saying is the beginning, it's the inception of the Olmec presence in Central America. Can you believe that? Still trying to stretch something all the way back to the Ice Age. But the test did not say that they didn't set an upper limit on their antiquity. Oh my God. When I'm reading people's books, these type of things just jump off the page to me. They just jump off the page. So on page 159, of Fingerprints of the Gods, Hancock made the same mistake everyone else made as well. He wrote that the Mayan calendar calculated the solar year at 365.242 days, but this is not true. Modern authors did this and assumed the calendar ended after 5,125 years, which it never did. Again, Hancock borrows from the mistakes of others without doing his own math. Hancock mentions that the Mayan calendar is measured in kins. These are days, and in a 20-day cycle called a yunal. And the Maya measured years as 360 days, called a ton. And in cycles of 20 years, called catons. And then 20 catons, or 7,200 days, times 20 is another cycle, the famous Bacton, 144,000 days. But Hancock never tells the reader that the Mayan calendar was exactly 13 Bactons. Each of the 13 Bactons represent the 13 heavens, represented mathematically and calendrically as 13.0.0.0.0. 13 Bactons is precisely 1,872,000 days. It's 144,000 times 13, which is exactly divisible by the Maya year of 360 days for a total of 5,200 Mayan years. How many of you know your ancient American studies? Because the Toltec histories are all measured out in units of 52. Just like the Jews had the 50-year Jubilee, the same cycle to the ancient Americas was 52. 52 was the sacred number of the Americas among the Inca, the Olmec, the Maya, the Zapotec, the Toltec, the Aztec, the great flood of ancient America. The date 1716 was divisible by units of 52. The tower that the giants built to oppose the gods in the ancient American traditions was 520 years after that same great flood that was survived by Coxcox. We have a problem here. That's 52 times 10, not 5125. 5,200 is the total Mayan long count. Graham Hancock and other researchers should have known this. In 2012 AD, the end of the Mayan calendar mistake was because of modern ignorant researchers imposing a 365.25 day year that we know today on an ancient culture and system where a 365 day year didn't even exist. Just like the zodiac didn't even exist. Just like precession didn't even exist. So by taking the 1,872,000 days of the Mayan long count and simply dividing it by 365.25, scholars got 5,125 years. Because they already know the Bactans pinpointed 3113 BC in the month of August, they automatically assumed that 2012 was going to be the 5,125th year. Therefore, it's the end of the Mayan long count. Everybody was on board. Thousands of books were published on it. Graham Hancock was involved in that. He talked about it. He wasn't on the bandwagon about the world being destroyed. Graham Hancock has always been very conservative about predictions. He even cites and read Richard R. Noon's 2000 Ice, the Ultimate Disaster, and borrows material from Richard Noon, but he doesn't buy into the idea that on May 5th, the year 2000, the world's going to suffer some type of cataclysm. Nor did he buy into the fact that in 2012 the world was going to be destroyed. But he still published it in his books, and he still mentioned it in his podcast that 2012 was the end of Mayan long count. He's been very quiet about 2012 ever since nothing happened. But so have a lot of other people. So let's look at that real quick. Let's look at that real quick. So this is what we're looking at. There's Mayan long count right here. There's the Mayan long count right there. 13 Bactans. The reason I'm drawing this to your attention, the Mayan long count actually ends in 2046, the same year that the Nemesis X object returns. 2046, the first year of a whole new sky, according to engineer David Davidson in 1924, who researched the Great Pyramid, saw that it was a three-dimensional geodetic, basically a chronograph of the movement of the sky. And he claims that the year 2045 is the final year that we will see the sky as we see it today, and that 2046 is year one of a whole new stellosphere. So I want to draw your attention to 713 BC, because 713 BC and the events that happened in 713 BC altered everything. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. What happened in 713 BC? Well, according to official chronology online, 713 BC was the first year of the pre-Julian Roman calendar. For some reason, the Romans thought that they need to backdate their calendar to this year. Why? What happened in 713 BC that was so important to the later Romans? 713 BC. I know in 713 BC, in the Annals of the World, chronologist Archbishop James Ussher, right here in this book, published Annals of the World, 1730. Here it is, 713 BC. What happened? Behold, I will bring again the shadow of the degrees, which is gone down in the sundial of Ahaz, 10 degrees backwards. So the sun returned 10 degrees, by which degrees it had gone down. The sun changed direction. It moved 10 degrees across the sky in the opposite direction. It's in the Bible. It happened during the reign of King Hezekiah. In the year of our calendar, 713 BC, the sky changed. Lots of books talk about it. What's this? This is Annals again. 713 BC. In biblical chronologist Stephen Jones' The Secrets of Time, 713 BC is the exact date that the sun changed directions in the sky and that a lightning bolt incinerated 185,000 Assyrians in their armor when they were near Jerusalem. Here's another chart that shows 713 BC, right there in the middle. 713 BC. What happened in 713 BC? Well, I know this. It was connected to the Mayan long count. The Bactans were all 400 years of 360 days each. Each one of these Bactans is 144,000 days. Divided by 360 is 400 Mayan years. Here it is, right here. 6 Bactans. As soon as the 6th Bactan happened, 864,000 days, or 2,400 years exactly, from the start of the Mayan long count, we have the sun changing direction in 713 BC. And the length of the year suddenly changed from 360 days to 365.25 days. And suddenly, within 200 years, different civilizations were experimenting with a whole new way of looking at the sky. It's called the solar zodiac. And there's not a trace of the solar zodiac before this date. That's another thing we're about to show. Not a trace. John Jackson, in the year 1752, John Jackson wrote, "We know also that an Assyrian period ended in 712 BC. I'm sorry, that was Atlantis. That was Ignatius Donnelly. Atlantis, the antediluvian world. This is a book far superior to anything Graham Hancock has ever produced. This book has way more information and much better information, much more verifiable information. But that's where that quote came from. Now, John Jackson, 1752, Chronological Antiquities right here. He said, all writers agree that the 23rd of February was the terminalia, or the last day of the year, after which all intercalary months and days were added. But February, having had 28 days from the reign of Numa, king of Rome, in 713 BC, the last 5 days, which at first were intercalary, were reckoned as part of the month. It was in 713 BC that the Romans, or 712 BC, that the Romans added 5 days to February. They're called the unlucky days. Here is 713 BC on the official Archaix chronology. All these different chronological systems right here on one chart. These are all on one chart. Right there, the 713 BC anomaly, sun retrogrades 10 degrees, year altered from 360 days to 365 is right here. It changed the length of the Bactans from 400 years to 394. There's still 144,000 days, but it changed the end of the Mayan long count from 2012 to 2046. You're not going to read any of that in Fingerprints of the Gods, but you can read a lot about it in Immanuel Velikovsky, who Graham Hancock avoids like the plague. So I probably have another chart somewhere. Let me find it real quick. Pretty sure that I do. Yeah, I got this chart. Again, Mayan long count, sun retrogrades, 713 BC, right there. It's all kinds of things on this chart. You can see how the Mayan long count was a day count system. You are being completely gaslit by Graham Hancock, who specifically stated in his book that the Maya were so advanced they were able to calculate the year at 365.24. It's not true. Scholars calculated that and then imposed that interpretation on the Mayan long count. The Mayan long count is a day count system, 13 Bactans. It's a total of 1,872,000 days starting in 3113 BC, and it ends in 2046 at the beginning of a whole new sky. So all this talk that you see in all these books, because I've had arguments online and people shut up after I drop all my data. They don't want to talk about it no more. All this talk and all these books by Jose Argaia, who put the time in the technosphere, the Mayan factor, he dropped off the map. You don't even hear from him anymore because everything in his books was BS. But so many people borrowed from him. And he had this huge idea and theory, and he showed all these computer graphs and diagrams trying to show how the Maya were so advanced that they had done all these calculations. None of that's true. The Mayan long count has always been so simple. It's 13 Bactans. Each Bactan is 144,000 days. The total is 1,872,000 days. It is a day count system just like the book of Genesis. The evening and the morning was the first day. The evening and the morning was the second day. It's a day count system, just like the Sumerian star count system. It's a day count system. This is why these great, fantastic numbers, like he likes to throw these numbers out that he got from Hamlet's Mill, not even understanding where Hamlet, the two authors of Hamlet's Mill, got these numbers and what they mean. 432,000 is the number that Graham Hancock fixates on, showing, oh yeah, these great spans of time, there must have been an advanced civilization that did all these calculations they knew. No, 432,000 days is just 3 Mayan Bactans. It's just 3 Mayan Bactans. That's all it is. 144 times 3 is 432. It is so simple. 432,000 is the number in the Sumerian king list for the appearance of Enki and the Anuna before the flood. They appeared 432,000 shars before the Great Flood. Did they appear 500,000 years before the Great Flood? No. There would have been 20 Great Floods in that period of time. No. It's 432,000 days, which becomes 12 centuries. That's it. That's it. And this is exactly what we have in Arabian and Phoenician traditions, that the pre-flood world, the civilizing of the pre-flood world, the Pentapolis, endured a dynasty for 12 centuries. Yeah, it all fits perfectly. Once you understand how different civilizations factored time, everything in the traditional mythological and textual record that we have fits perfectly. But you're not going to hear that in Fingerprints of the Grift at all. So there is no arguing against the idea that 360 is the only year our predecessors knew. Prior to the year 713 BC, the entire world's calendars, all their calendrical systems, temples with 360 niches, everything was based off 360 days. That the lunisolar year of 12, remember, this is from a 300-year-old book by scholarship, that the lunisolar year of 12 months, each of 30 days, and the whole consisting of 360 days, was the original stated year of mankind, and was in the most ancient times used by Egyptians, Chaldeans, Phoenicians, Persians, Greeks, and Romans. Here it is again. Diodorus Siculus right here relates that at the sepulture of Osiris, the priests who were appointed to bewail his death filled 360 milk bowls every day. This was to denote the primitive Egyptian year used in the reign of Osiris. Over and over, I have whole videos talking about the 360-day year, but here it is. In the reign of Semiramis of Babylon, again, the Chaldean kings, Berosus, 360 days. Again, Egyptian antiquities right here, the gods, the year was 360 days. Again, Manetho and the Chaldean historians, again, before and after the universal deluge, the year was 360 days. The catalog of the kings of the centuries after the flood to be antediluvian deities, god kings, they made their times equal to the 10 antediluvian kings of Berosus. Here it is, and to be just 1,200 old Egyptian years of 360 days each, from Vulcan to the flood. Vulcan is Enki. Enoch. Over and over and over in old historical books, we find even the Phoenicians, 360 days was a year. Lunisolar period of time. In the days of Abraham and Canaan, right here, the Egyptian year was 360 days. Can't make this stuff up. It's all here, 360 days, over and over. Here's Alexander Del Mar, a scholar in 1900 in the worship of Augustus Caesar. He goes through here and he talks about all these cycles are nothing but exaggerations of the 360 day and 360 year cycles. Alexander Mar has a bunch of chronological material. This is Busenbark. Busenbark says the use of mathematics and astrological calculations began about the 8th century BC. Why that time? Why that time? Thereafter, knowledge of astronomy advanced rapidly, and records of the period reveal notations concerning the spring equinox, new moon, eclipses, positions of the planets, and the rising of the fixed stars. The first eclipses observed in Babylonia are mentioned in the Almagest, are from 721 and 720 BC. What? How come they weren't 1,000 years earlier? When we had Venus almanacs, when we had civilizations watching Venus and Sirius, the dog star. How come no one knew? How come no one knew of a solar zodiac? No one ever heard in the entire world of Aries and Pisces and Libra and Sagittarius and Scorpio and all these constellations. The solar zodiac was totally unknown prior to this year, 713 BC. Here's Alexander Heidel, the Babylonian Genesis. And the waters prevailed upon the earth in 150 days. This is used by scholarship to show that the year in Genesis was 360 days. Because 5 months is 150 days. That means each month is 30 days. Anyway, all these sources, chronology of ancient kingdoms, all these sources talk about, Sir Isaac Newton also talks about the year was 360 days. Just can't make this stuff up, guys. You can't do it. So, Hancock relies heavily on dating ruins and events by the precession of the equinoxes, that the Earth retrogrades 1 degree in the celestial sphere every 72 years. That all sounds real good. By this method, he can date South American and Near Eastern traditions, ruins, and events to impossible ages of the past. What Hancock and all those who use precession ignore is the research of Emanuel Velikovsky, who shows that in the late 8th century BC, which is about 713 BC, the sun changed direction. Then the year was changed to 360 days. I mean, from 360 to 365 days. Then all of a sudden, within 200 years, the world began developing new solar zodiacs, and 300 years later, the 12 houses of the modern zodiac first appeared, Aries through Pisces, although all 12 constellations weren't even developed yet. This means that the precessional dating can never be used before anything 27 centuries ago. Let me repeat this. If the sun changed directions and the entire world recorded that they had to alter their calendars from 360 days to 365 days, and that all of a sudden now the sun was being used to measure a whole new system, a solar zodiac, instead of the prior lunar zodiacs that had totally different star patterns, what happened? This means that precessional dating can never be used for anything prior to 2,700 years ago. Anything before 713 BC is a totally different sky. Is this theoretical? No. Immanuel Velikovsky made his case in 3 or 4 books. Graham Hancock and all of Graham Hancock's followers ignore Velikovsky. There's a huge difference here. Immanuel Velikovsky's research was attacked by the scientific community. Graham Hancock's is not. Graham Hancock, in his promotion gives off the public idea that Graham Hancock is being suppressed by scholarship. No, he's not. It's not the same scenario. Immanuel Velikovsky was suppressed and attacked by the scientific community. Graham Hancock is ignored because he's made all these mistakes. He's made so many mistakes, scholars can't even take him seriously. He doesn't even use the right calendrical systems with the right cultures. They can't take him seriously. He mixes uniformitarianism and catastrophism in ways that totally offends both. It's not the same. No academics, no scholarship has come out and published books and attacked the theories of Graham Hancock. No, Graham Hancock is ignored. Immanuel Velikovsky, on the other hand, was vehemently attacked by the entire establishment because he ruffled feathers. Why? Because he used their science against them and showed that all this crap you've been publishing about the past is untrue because the sky changed. The position of Earth has changed, and it changed our year. It changed everything. Immanuel Velikovsky, Worlds in Collision, Earth in Upheaval, Mankind in Amnesia, all this. There's more books, and I have them all. He's got one, Ages in Chaos. Yeah, there are books published trying to attack Immanuel Velikovsky. So I believe Hancock knows that precession is bullshit. And in Fingerprints of the Gods, he refused to even once acknowledge the research of Immanuel Velikovsky, again, practicing exclusions, not trying to draw attention to Immanuel Velikovsky's books, because in those books are proofs that Graham Hancock's whole entire Younger Dryas impact theory model is all bullshit. Atlantis dating, the Ice Age, all BS. Precessional dating, all BS. Hancock dates Tiahuanaco in the Bolivian Altiplano in the Andes Mountains in South America to the Ice Age. It is in total defiance of all local traditions. The official Bolivian and Peruvian archaeologists totally disagree with Hancock, but it doesn't matter. Just like when Hancock on Ancient Apocalypse went to Malta. No one in the Maltese archaeological department agrees with Graham Hancock at all. Everywhere Graham Hancock goes, even in Turkey, well, no matter where he goes, the actual real archaeologists don't want to have anything to do with him. They don't agree with anything this man says. It's because he cherry picks. It's because his research is very shoddy. Hancock borrows from the mistakes of previous writers such as Poznansky, who claimed Tiahuanaco was 17,000 years old and solely based this whole concept on the obliquity of the ecliptic. So dumb. The reason it's dumb is because Tiahuanaco was thrust 12,000 feet into the sky. Tiahuanaco was an ancient coastal city. Lake Titicaca, which is 138 miles in length, was formerly salt water, and it has saltwater marine life forms that have adapted over thousands of years to fresh water. Sharks and starfish and jellyfish, things that were only in the sea, are in Lake Titicaca at 12,000 feet altitude. They have adapted to their environment. But the obliquity of the ecliptic is how you get all these falsified dates. There's nothing before 713 BC that can be measured by the sky. Not astrology, not the sun, the moon, the planets, nothing, because Earth's position has changed. I'm going to show you. Poznansky invented this before Emanuel Velikovsky even published his research, showing how everything in the 8th century changed. Precessional and obliquity dating absolutely require that the movement of the earth and the movements of the heavens have never changed in 100,000 years, 17,000 years at least here. This is uniformitarian model, that nothing in the sky has ever changed, that the sun has always come up, the moon has always moved across the sky in a 29-day cycle. Everything is uniform. That's why it's called uniformitarianism. Uniformitarians have to ignore all the data that we have on the Phoenix phenomenon, all of Emanuel Velikovsky's data on 713 BC, the sun changing directions 4 times, on any evidence of pole shifts. Every bit of this must be shelved to the uniformitarian. The uniformitarian model cannot admit any type of cataclysm that changed the sky, because then it changes everything in the historical model. Graham Hancock is promoting that a cataclysm, he's saying it's the Great Flood in the Ice Age period, and that Atlantis was at this period as well. And he's saying this based off processional data while being a catastrophist. However, he has to ignore all the catastrophist data put out by professionals and authors far more qualified than he is, showing that in the ancient world, the skies changed 4 times. You can't cherry pick like that unless you're going to publish a book called Fingerprints of the Gods. You can't cherry pick like that. It's practicing exclusions. You have to do away with a tremendous amount of data in order to promote your bogus theory. So, a cataclysm in the 8th century completely altered the movement of the world. Is this theoretical? No. Every civilization in the ancient world in the 700s BC changed their calendars from 360 days to 365. That alone is proof that something epic happened. What's the next data set that something epic happened? I'm going to tell you what it is. It's the sudden appearance of a solar zodiac. The 8th century BC changing the year completely collapses any dating models used in archaeoastronomy. There isn't a single book out there. I don't care if it's John Anthony West, Andrew Collins, Robert Bauval, Robert Schoch, all of Graham Hancock's books. None of these books are accurate if they are promoting any date for any temple structures, ruins, monuments, megaliths, or anything before the year 713 BC. Every date will be off alignment, and the further back in time, the greater the error is going to be. Archaeoastronomy dies in 714 BC because the entire sky changed. So Hancock tries to bridge 2 things together that are not connected. He claims that the numbers 12, 30, 72, and 36, 4 numbers. In his book, he published this. He claims that the numbers 12, the numbers 30, the number 72, and the number 360 are important in the ancient world because they are processional, numbers. Desperately trying to provide evidence of an ancient knowledge for precession so he can date things to the Younger Dryas period. But that is a lie. These numbers are not processional. The whole processional shit was made up. They're sexagesimal. These numbers are sexagesimal: 12, 30, which is half of 60, the ultimate sexagesimal number. 60 is divisible by 12. 12, 30, 72, which is divisible by 12. 72 is half of 144. Golden proportion number. And the number 360, the calendar round of the ancient world. These numbers appear in traditions, myths, and in the measurements of ancient monuments and structures and legends and lore, not because of precession. That is a modern imposition. They are there because they are remnants of the ancient single calendrical system that governed all cultures, which was sexagesimal. A lot of thunder and lightning. But this is a lie. They're not processional, guys. These numbers are sexagesimal sums and all part of the elaborate day count and shar count dating systems of the ancient world. The holy number of the Maya, the Olmec, the Vedic calendar, the Sumerian cuneiform appearance of the gods before the Great Flood, it was 432,000 shars. Dividing the holy 432,000 into the sexagesimal sums provides the numbers 36,000, 14,400, 6,000, and 1,200. 4 lengths of time found in the records of almost all civilizations that have flood traditions, and they're all connected to yugas, to the Great Flood, to Mayan Bactans, and Sumerian epics before the flood and during the reign of the Anunnaki. All these numbers are found over and over and over in the ancient world. They are not processional numbers. They are the lengths of days. Epics that are measured in days. Here is a breakdown of the processional deceit. Hancock asserts that 12 signifies the constellations of the zodiac. He just freestyled that. He asserts that the number 30 was the degrees of each constellation of this zodiac. He asserts that the number 72 was the amount of years for a precessional shift of 1 degree in the sky. And he asserts that the number 360 is the total number of degrees of the zodiac, the ecliptic. Then he makes 72 to be multiplied by 30 to produce 2160, which is 2,160, and multiplies 2160 by 12 to produce 25,920 years. And then he calls this the Great Precessional Cycle. You know where he got it from? He got it from authors who got it from the mystics of the Golden Dawn Society. There is no historical record in existence. There are no ancient writers that knew anything about a 25,920 year cycle. It does not exist. But this is entirely arbitrary, and there is nowhere in the historical record or ancient practices that followed this invented idea. The true meaning of these numbers to the ancients was 12, represented the 12 houses of the moon, a lunar zodiac. 30 was the amount of days in a month. It was a lunar year of ancient Egypt. 72 was the Sumerian Arab or pentagram, the portal number, and 72 times 5 is 360, which is the 4th number that he claims is processional. But 360 is the number of days of all ancient peoples and civilizations. Every calendar in the ancient world was divisible by 360. The Sumerian chronology of shars, 432,000 units. The Vedic yugas, the Olmec and the Mayan, the Zapotec calendars, the Bactans, all perfectly divisible by 360. Not by 365. So I want to show you the page. Let's look at page 370. We got page 370 in here. No, maybe not. Maybe I don't. Yeah, I do. Through page 370. Let's look at it. So on page 370, Graham Hancock writes, The pyramid text appeared to contain several versions of this diagram. Moreover, as is so often the case with prehistoric myths which transmit hard astronomical data, the processional symbolism is interwoven tightly with violent images of terrestrial destruction, as though to suggest that the breaking of the mill of heaven, that is the transition every 2160 years from one zodiacal age to another, could under ill-omened circumstances bring catastrophic influences to bear on terrestrial events. Every bit of this is made up. Nowhere in the historical record is there a 2160-year period. Nowhere in the historical record is there a zodiacal age. Nowhere in the historical record prior to 100 BC, the Dendera zodiac of Egypt, which was Greek and has different signs than the zodiac we know today. It could be a lunar zodiac. That's why it may be different. But nowhere in the historical record prior to 100 BC is there a zodiac that had anything to do with the sun. This is totally made up. Moreover, as is so often the case with prehistoric myths which transmit hard astronomical data, he hasn't provided any, the processional symbolism is interwoven tightly with violent images of terrestrial destruction. Where is all this data? Why don't you have 100 pages in your book showing exactly what you just made up? Where is that information at? I want to see violent images of terrestrial destruction. I want to see prehistoric myths which transmit hard astronomical data, because I know for a fact that the Golden Dawn Age society from 1830 to 1870 made up the entire 25,920 year processional cycle. Every bit of that. Every house of the zodiac being 2,160 years was all made up by mystics. It was heavily promoted by Helena Blavatsky in The Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled. It has no historical precedent. None. Keep smoking that shit, Hancock. All these people should be embarrassed. They copied Graham Hancock's mistakes, and he copied mistakes by people who were citing the mystics, and then the mystics made it all up. It's terrible. It's terrible. I ain't checked my chat in a while. All right. Let's see here. So I know there's people new to my channel or people who will watch this video in the near future. You're going to have to know this material. There's just no way not. There's no way not to see this. So my Archaix veterans, you're going to get a refresher course. I'm going to try and breeze through this really fast, but this is on the absolute proof from scholarship, from academics, that the zodiac that we have today involving the sun, before we continue with more of Graham Hancock's BS here, we have to establish a hardcore historical and scientific fact. And that is that the solar zodiac that we know today with the 12 houses of Aries through Pisces did not exist until the sky changed in 713 BC. It is absolutely important to understand this, because this is the origin for 1,000 mistakes in 100,000 books in 100 different languages. The Book of the Secrets of Enoch, right here. The use of mathematics and astrological calculations began about the 8th century BC. That's 713 BC. Thereafter, knowledge of astronomy advanced rapidly, and records of that period reveal notations concerning the spring equinox, new moon, eclipses, positions of the planets. Oh, we've already read this. It's from the Almagest. But it just shows you that the translator of the book of the Secrets of Enoch even adds to this, showing that, man, we don't have a zodiac prior to the 8th century BC. What is this right here? This is Encyclopedia Britannica. Oh, this is also the Book of the Secrets of Enoch right here. It is not found either in B or SOC translations of the Book of the Secrets of Enoch. Furthermore, throughout the rest of the book, only 7 heavens are mentioned or implied. The term Mazaloth is the Hebrew name for the 12 signs of the zodiac. So on my channel, for those who don't know, I've gone deep and showed you that the word Mazaloth and Muzzaloth is the circle of is basically a word for the circle of animals that is being that's how it's used. But it's a lie. It's a lie. I'm going to show you here in a minute that a lot of Jewish interpolations have been added to older manuscripts, throwing like the Bible. I'm going to show you where it was put in the Bible. It's not true. They're throwing the word Mazaloth in there from the book of Job to make it look like the knowledge of the zodiac was something that the Jews were in possession of in far ancient times, but they weren't. These are, according to scholars, these are interpolations. And this scholar here who translated the Book of the Secrets of Enoch is showing that the older manuscripts called B and Sock do not have any reference to the zodiac. But this new manuscript now inserts the word Mazaloth, which has been inserted in Bible dictionaries and even in the Bible itself. It is a Jewish deception. Let's keep going. Encyclopedia Britannica 1911 specifically says, let's see, the history of the 7th sign is somewhat complicated. The earlier Greek writers Eudoxus, Eratosthenes, Hipparchus knew of only 11 zodiacal symbols, but made one do double duty, extending the scorpion across the 7th and 8th divisions. The balance, obviously indicating the equality of day and night, is first mentioned as a sign of the autumnal equinox by Geminus and Varro. This is over 500 years after 713 BC. The knowledge of the solar zodiac thus turned to account for dualistic purposes was undoubtedly derived from the Greeks. By them too, it was introduced into Hindustan. Aryabhata, about the beginning of the Christian era, reckoned by the same signs as Hipparchus. They were transmitted from India by Buddhist missionaries to China, but remain in abeyance until the Jesuit reform of Chinese astronomy in the 17th century. The Encyclopedia Britannica claims that the people of India got the zodiac from the Greeks. Let's see, the Chinese method of observation by intervals of what we now call right ascension to equal portions of the celestial equator. Projected upon the ecliptic, these were considerably unequal, and the sea accordingly differed essentially from the Chaldean and the Greek signs. Their use was chiefly astrological, and their highly figurative names, Great Splendor, Immense Void, Fire of the Phoenix, this is the Chinese zodiac, it was lunar, had reference to no particular stars. They became virtually merged in the European series, stamped with official recognition over 2 centuries ago by the Jesuits. The Jesuits created the modern solar zodiac and stamped it over a more ancient Chinese lunar system. The calendar of the Brahmins, the old Indian names of the months were derived from them. Their existence was presupposed in the entire structure of Hindu ritual and science. They do not, however, obtain full recognition in Sanskrit literature until the Brahmana period, 7th or 8th century BC. The Rig Veda contains only one allusion to them, where it is said that Soma is placed in the lap of the Nakshastras. The Nakshastras just means constellations, star patterns. It's not proof of any type of zodiac. In Search of Ancient Astronomies, Dr. E.C. Krupp is an expert. The most spectacular representation of the Egyptian sky is the ceiling from the Temple of Hathor at Dendera in Upper Egypt. The famous circular Dendera zodiac, known now in the, I think that's the Louvre. All available evidence indicates that the concept of the zodiac was not native to Egypt. However, instead, it is believed that the zodiac was imported to Egypt from Mesopotamia at some late but unknown date. The earliest known representation of the zodiac in Egypt was found at the now destroyed Temple of Esna, also in Upper Egypt, which cannot be dated earlier than 246 BC and was perhaps nearly 70 years more recent than that. Dendera, which we have a 12 constellation zodiac, but the constellations aren't the same, is 30 BC. Here is the 1902 edition of Encyclopedia Britannica. Our modern asterisms first appear in the phenomena of Eudoxus about 370 BC, contemporary with Plato. But Eudoxus, there is reason to believe, consulted not the heavens, but a celestial globe of an anterior epoch, of which the stars and the signs were forced into a natural agreement. The representation thus handed down to us in the verses of Aratus has been thought to tally best with the state of the sky about 2000 BC, and the mention of a pole star for which Eudoxus was rebuked by Hipparchus seems, as Mr. W.T. Lynn has pointed out, to refer to a time when Alpha Draconis stood near the pole. What's being said here is that Eudoxus seems to be relating astronomical information from a time period when the sky was very, very different than what we know today. Robert Graves, undisputed authority on Greek antiquities in The White Goddess, wrote, "When and where the zodiac originated is not known, but it is believed to have gradually evolved in Babylonia from the 12 incidents in the life story of the hero Gilgamesh, his killing of the bull, his love passage with the virgin, his adventures with 2 scorpion men, the scales later took the place of one of these, and the deluge story corresponding with the water carrier. Calendar tablets of the 7th century BC bear this out, but the Epic of Gilgamesh is not a really ancient one." You've been gaslit in hundreds of books that have told you that the Epic of Gilgamesh is evidence of an ancient zodiac, but scholarship says it's the exact opposite. That the events of the zodiac, turning the sun into a hero that passes through these signs, was developed out of an older system, copied from the Acts of Gilgamesh. The Dance of Time, The Origins of the Calendar, Michael Judge. He wrote, "From the earliest days, sky watchers recognized a set of 12 groups of constellations that kept company with the sun and planets. These constellations always traveled within an area extending a little above and below the ecliptic. In the 5th century BC, Babylonian sky watchers divided the ecliptic into 12 segments, each marked by one of these constellations. Most of them were named after real or fantastic animals, hence the term zodiac, which comes from a Greek word meaning circle of animals." 5th century BC. The concept was being developed in Babylonia and made its way to Greece. Calendars and Constellations of the Ancient World, Emmeline Plunkett. The purely Indian Rig Veda, containing no Grecian taint, the 12-fold divisions of the zodiac appear to be unknown. This opinion as to the Rashis or constellations of the solar zodiac is so generally adopted that the age of any Sanskrit work in which mention of these Rashis occurs is at once, no matter what its claims to antiquity may be, set down as not earlier than the comparatively modern date of 300 BC. Scholars who know a whole lot about interpolations, and they know how different scribes want to make different ancient texts look even older. One of the litmus tests for scholarship is if that they mention constellations or zodiac, we know that those texts, no matter how much they claim to be ancient, are about 300 BC if they're coming out of India. That's a hell of a statement. How did Graham Hancock miss that? Also, the Grecian introduction of the 12-fold zodiac into India was about 300 BC. The date of 570 AD for the fixation of the initial point of the Indian zodiacs and for the commencement of the history of Indian astronomy. Do you see that, how late that date is? 570 AD. These propositions are based on cogent reasonings and are maintained by very high authorities. 1833, Anacalypsis. Oh no, 1836, Anacalypsis. The great Higgins tells us, this is a fantastic book. 2 volumes, both of them are gigantic. The signs of the zodiac are not any of them remarkable for being connected with objects of Indian nature. The 28 Hindu lunar mansions and the asterisms are almost all named after objects peculiarly Hindu. This raises a strong presumption against the solar zodiac being a Hindu invention. If the solar zodiac had been of Hindu or African growth, the elephant and camel would have been found there. That's a pretty good point. Mr. Maurice has observed that the signs of the zodiac cannot be of Egyptian origin because they are not adapted to the order in which the seasons succeed each other in Egypt. Wow, that's pretty interesting there. Egypt is different because it gets its climate and it gets its sustenance from the south in a river that flows from the mountains of the south in Africa all the way up to northern Egypt. That's pretty interesting. The Great Pyramid, its divine message, engineer David Davidson, 1924, with H. Aldersmith. The earliest zodiac is therefore the lunar zodiac, a system of nocturnal signs. Marsupials, anybody? Vapor canopy, anybody? From the conception of the lunar zodiac originated the many anciently pictured forms of horned headdress supporting a moon. The latter often hieroglyphically represented in the shape of a crescent to avoid its being confused with the sun. Figured as crowning various deities of the year, the lunar zodiac is the zodiac of the ancient Euphratians. They did not know a solar zodiac. The original system was of 6 signs. The original zodiac consisted only of 6 constellations: Taurus, the crab, tortoise, virgin, ear of corn, scorpion, and Capricornus Pisces. This is from Dawn of Astronomy, page 401. Sir Norman Lockyer again quotes Professor Sayce in Hibbert Lectures. According to the official religion of Chaldea, the sun god was the offspring of the moon god. Such a belief could have only arisen where the moon god was the supreme object of worship. To the Semite, the moon god was the lord and father of the gods. Now, we're not going to get into it in this video, but my Archaix veterans already know that because of the collapse of the vapor canopy, the sun appeared. And this is what began the ancient American sun calendars. The first sun, second, the water sun, the water sun, the fire sun, the earth sun, the son of the giants, all that. It is said that Jerome of Prague, when traveling among the heathen Lithuanians early in the 15th century, found a tribe who worshipped the sun and idolized a large iron hammer. The priest informed him that once the sun had been invisible for many months because a powerful king had imprisoned him in a strong tower. But the signs of the zodiac had broken open the tower with this very hammer and released the sun. Therefore, they worshipped it. 713 BC, the sun retrograded. In some parts of the world, the sun would have looked to have disappeared. And then all of a sudden, according to this tradition, after the sun reappeared, so did the solar zodiac. Imagine that. Here's Mazzaroth in the book of Job. So I'm going to show you. Here's the passage in the book of Job where Mazzaroth appears, and people try to swear up and down it means zodiac, and it does not. Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Canst thou bring forth Mazzaroth in his season? Or canst thou guide Arcturus with his sons? It doesn't even make sense. This doesn't make sense with canst thou bring forth Zodiac in his seasons? It's not. It's not. The reason is because it's an interpolation. It is a Jewish word inserted into the text to hide something. Mazzaroth in Book of Job is not the zodiac. The King James Version of the Bible was the first to put it in its margins that Mazzaroth referred to the houses of the zodiac. But this is not a translation. It was a guess. In Smith's Bible Dictionary from 1905, we find that the Peshito-Syriac version of the Book of Job renders this as the Great Bear, which aligns with the spirit of the text, mentioning single constellations not a part of the zodiac. This is a 2,000-year-old version of the Book of Job, and it mentions the Great Bear, not Mazzaroth. So let's read it. Canst thou bind the sweet influences of the Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Canst thou bring forth the Great Bear in his season, or canst thou guide Arcturus with his sons? Bears hibernate. They hibernate during the cold, and then they come out in their season. This never meant zodiac. That's a video of mine. I don't know how that got in here. That's a video of mine that goes even deeper on these things. Here's ancient history, the ages before the world. The Babylonians retained the primitive lunar months and the lunar year, but in some branches of astronomy, they made remarkable progress. By the 7th century before our era, they were able to trace the course of the sun through the 12 constellations of the zodiac. How come they didn't do it before when Sumerian sexagesimal mathematics was so precise that they had divided the day into 8,640 seconds? They had created a mathematical system that divided time into seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, years, and the celestial sphere even into minutes of arc. Venus almanacs showing the movements of Venus going centuries into the past and centuries into the future, all of this, but they couldn't figure out where the sun was going to be in 12 divisions of the sky until the 7th century BC. It's because in 713 BC the sky changed. They're not dumb. It didn't take them thousands of years to figure that out. The sky changed and they figured it out pretty quick. This is an old book, Dictionary of Dates. In this book, we find zodiac signs of 12 signs on an imaginary zone in the heavens suggested by the 12 full moons in the course of a year, circa 560 BC. Why is all this relevant? Why is all this relevant? I'm going to tell you why. It's extremely relevant because Graham Hancock uses the zodiac to date things to the Younger Dryas period. You can't use a system that wasn't even invented, it didn't even exist, to date all kinds of weird monuments and traditions just arbitrarily and say that they're 13,000 BC, that well right here because of precession and because of the precession of the equinoxes and because this right here is a goddess with a lion face, Sekhmet, or what, you know what? It's got to be the age of Leo. Therefore, these traditions right here all have everything to do with the age of Leo. This in the age of Leo, if we look at the constellations and we go backwards where the sun would have been, guys, it's the Younger Dryas period. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. So I'm gonna have to overwhelm you real quick with some hardcore data. It's extremely important for you to understand the Archaix research shows how all this processional zodiacal misinformation completely changes everything when it's corrected. Graham Hancock asserts that the Egyptians knew of a solar zodiac and even calculated the 25,920-year cycle. Both statements are untrue. There's no solar zodiac in the coffin texts, in the pyramid text, in the ossuaries, in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. There is no solar zodiac. In all 26 Egyptian dynasties, there is not a single shred of evidence that a solar zodiac was ever known. 100 BC is the first known zodiac in Egypt, and it was Greek, built by the Ptolemies. And the constellations aren't even the same. Some of them are, not all of them. But it's 100 BC, 600 years after the sky changed in 713 BC. Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Elamite, Hittite epics. None of these epics knew of a zodiac. Guys, we're talking about the Epic of Gilgamesh, no zodiacal references. The Enema Elish, 7 tablets of Babylonian creation, nothing. All of them are packed with astrology. The Karsag tablets, the Lamentation text, the Adapa epic, the Era epos, the Atrahasis epic, the Omen text, the Venus almanacs, nothing. There isn't a hint of a solar zodiac anywhere in that. Somebody get Gnostic Academy's attention and tell him to start taking some notes. Chinese zodiac established in the Han Dynasty about 100 BC. That's about the same time that they were rebuilding the Great Wall. But most of the symbols, 11 of the symbols, are totally different. The oldest Sanskrit text on astrology is from 270 AD, about the time Christianity was being developed. It is the Yavana Jakata. You know what that means in Sanskrit? It means sayings of the Greeks. That's Sanskrit, Vedic, from India. Montukla wrote that the Hindu zodiac was borrowed from the Greek. Ancient astronomical texts of India dating to 1000 BC is the Surya Siddhanta. Not a hint of the solar zodiac is in that text. All the great epics of India, the Ramayana, the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, no zodiac is mentioned in those texts. The ancient American civilizations that had amazing calendars, the Maya, the Olmec, the Toltec, the Zapotec, the Aztec, nothing. Not a hint in the North American systems, in the Japanese Nihon Shoki, nothing of a solar zodiac. African, Australian, Pacific Islanders, Micronesia, Melanesia, nothing. Polynesia, nothing of a solar zodiac. Here's a list of ancient writers who should have mentioned the solar zodiac had they known it existed. You have to understand, guys, not even the great Ionian naturalists and scientists from Thales on down knew anything of a solar zodiac. It's nowhere. None of them knew of a solar zodiac, and none of them knew of a 25,920 or 26,000 year cycle. It's not mentioned anywhere. Berosus, Babylonian historian in Alexander, Egypt. Manetho, Alexandrian Egypt, the greatest library of the ancient world. Josephus, Philo-Judaicus, Herodotus, the great historian. Sanchuniathon, Phoenician historian, Livy, Pliny the Elder, Strabo, Diodorus, Thales, Anaxagoras, Anaximander, Thucydides, Hipparchus, Homer in his Odyssey and his Iliad, Hesiod in Theogony and in Works and Days, Theognis, Lucretius, who wrote an amazing 7,400 line poem on the nature of the universe. Nothing about the zodiac. Posidonius, Plato, Aristarchus, Crantor, Virgil, Aristophanes, Cicero, Aristotle, Tacitus, Plutarch, Marcus Varro, Seneca, none of them wrote anything about a solar zodiac or a 25,920 year or 26,000 year cycle. Not one of these men ever cited the solar zodiac, Aries through Pisces. Not one of these men mentioned this cycle Graham Hancock is promoting. none wrote anything about precession. All zodiacs known to ancient writers were lunar, moon reckoning systems, and they did not know of an Aries, Pisces, Gemini, Libra, Virgo, none of that. They didn't know none of it. These names don't even appear until 200 AD under Ptolemy in Tetrabiblos. No ancient Minoan, no Mycenaean, or any Greek references, nothing in Greek art, pillars, statuary, temples, monuments, nothing showing a solar zodiac prior to 100 BC. Strangely, in the whole of Greek mythology, the zodiac is not found anywhere. We're talking about Greek mythology. In the whole of Greek mythology, the zodiac's not found anywhere. There are no myths of heroes and gods, and there are hundreds. There are hundreds. There are no myths of heroes and gods. Varies. Yeah. Tell me when Gemini went out and did something. Share with me all the legends of Cancer. I need to know the legends of Cancer. Yeah. There's got to be some Greek myths that show the what is that? The traditions and mythological lore of Libra. Where are they at? Doesn't happen. None of the traditions of the ancient oracles of Dodona, Pythia, the Pythian oracle, the oracle of Olympias, the oracle of Didyma. There's 4 ancient Greek oracles right there. None of the oracles ever cited, and there's hundreds and hundreds of things the oracles put out that have been recorded in the historical record. There's nothing, not even the Sibylline oracles, nothing about a solar zodiac at all. There was no solar zodiac in existence even in the days of Alexander of Macedon, who later became Alexander the Great, and there's no mention of the Greek zodiac, solar zodiac, even by the historian astronomer Callisthenes, who lived in the days of Alexander. The earliest church fathers were Clement of Rome and Polycarp. Neither wrote about the zodiac. Irenaeus of Gaul, in about 175 BC, wrote a text called Against Heresies, and he named all the abominations and all the things that the church does not approve of. You know what he didn't write about? He didn't have on the list anything about the solar zodiac. Nothing. Now, however, Tatian the Syrian, another writer, did mention the zodiac as being demonic. But this is 800, almost 900 years after 713 BC. The zodiac is not found anywhere in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The zodiac is not found anywhere in the Nag Hammadi text. 52 texts of the Gnostic Nag Hammadi library, 1,200 pages of text. There are references to astrology, and there are even references to the 12 archons. But Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Libra, Sagittarius, Scorpio, Virgo, nothing in the Nag Hammadi text at all. Tell that one to Gnostic Academy. The zodiac is not even found in the Bible. The Bible's a pretty damn big book. The zodiac is not found in the books of Enoch. It's not even found in the collection of books called the Apocrypha. In none of the pseudepigraphical texts is there a solar zodiac found. The zodiac suddenly appeared on the scene during the Roman period, but it is completely based off of Greek themes and symbols. If the zodiac was so important and known, it would have been painted in frescoes on walls, exhibited in statuary, relics. There's nothing. No pillars, no monuments, no art from ancient tombs, no legends, no traditions, nothing until 100 BC. That's 600 years after the sky changed. Astrology long ago was very popular. The Venus sightings the star Sirius, the original Sothic cycle. Observing the rising and the falling of the dog star Sirius, the constellation Orion, Orion's belt, Canis Major, Arcturus, Bootes, the seven sisters called the Pleiades, Ursa Major, and Thuban, the eye of the dragon, the pole star. These are the subjects of ancient astrology. And strangely, we already know that many people believe the moon was far more ancient than the sun. And this is because in a vapor canopy world like the antediluvian world, the pre-flood period, at nighttime the sky cleared. Condensation watered the ground. Genesis says there was no rain. And the reason there was no rain is because every night when the sun had passed over the sky, the sun was still there, but when it passed over the sky, all the cloud vapor canopy condensed and came down. The world cooled. As the world cooled, all the moisture came from the sky, and it says in Genesis it watered everything. The plants and the animals all had plenty of water. When the sun came back the next morning, the vapor canopy went up because the intense heat. Instantly, the vapor canopy went up, and the sun was never seen. But at nighttime, when the canopy came back down, the moon was magnified in the sky because the water droplets created a lensing effect and magnified the moon. The moon was great in the sky. But when the canopy collapsed in the month of May 2239 BC, that's when the Sumerians had to introduce a new god, Utu Shamash. After 1,000 years of having an unbroken pantheon of gods, they have to introduce the sun as a god. All of a sudden, at the end of Sumerian civilization, the Egyptians did too. After the second intermediate period, the Egyptians had to introduce Horus, the hours of the sun, a new god introduced into the pantheon. Why? Because the sky fell. When the sky fell, the vapor canopy collapsed. When the vapor canopy collapsed, it looked like the sun became the superior object in the sky when it was never seen before. The diurnal system had daytime being a dark purple light, and plants and animals thrived in this ambient radiation, ambient light, increased atmospheric pressure, more vitamins and minerals, and these conditions have been replicated in biospheres. I just came from Glen Rose, Texas, where they have 3 of those biospheres. This is the information that Graham Hancock's Younger Dryas theory obfuscates, and obfuscates it bad. So it's not just Graham Hancock. I can't just pick on Graham Hancock. But the people that ignore vapor canopy history and replace it with Ice Age theory, these same people also have to introduce precession as a way to date things. They have to ignore Emmanuel Velikovsky's research. But it's Billy Carson, Matt LaCroix, Jimmy Corsetti. It's not just Graham Hancock. It's Robert Bauval. It's John Anthony West, Rand Flemeth, Colin Wilson, David Roll, Lawrence Gardner, Christopher Knight, Robert Lomas, Andrew Collins, Nicholas Champion, Alan Meese, Randall Carlson. Dude, these are just a few of the very popular authors, and collectively they have sold 100 million books. They've made a phenomenal amount of money off a model that doesn't even exist. Doesn't even exist. It's all fake. How do the paranormies say it? It's all fake and gay. Quoting the paranormies, of course. So yeah, I'm gonna check my chat real quick before we continue. I don't even know what time it is. I can hear my generator still going out there, so the power must still be off. Thank you for that 138. That's a blessing. That's a blessing. So Hancock does copy the mistakes of others in assuming that the solar zodiac of Aries through Pisces was known prior to 500 BC, and it was not. when not a single one of these constellations or the zodiacal belt is found in the historical record or upon any ancient monuments, temples, and pyramids. How can you not have ancient temples and monuments that don't have the zodiac everywhere? If it was so important to the ancient world and they were using it to date and do all that, it's ludicrous. It's ludicrous. All zodiacs prior to 700 BC were lunar. Not even the great Ionian naturalist guy, Thales, and the great scientist of Ionia. None of them, none of their writings mention anything about the solar zodiac. It just didn't appear into the 12 houses of the zodiac, Aries through Pisces, did not enter the historical record until the 2nd century AD, at the exact same time that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were being composed. The 4 Gospels and the text that introduces the zodiac just happens to be called Tetrabiblos, the 4 books. So the alignments of the entire sky were different prior to 700 BC. But Hancock would not know this because he's a uniformitarian. And he assumes the sky hasn't changed in 100,000 years. He certainly ignored Velikovsky. And Hancock's own book glosses right over the truth with barely a mention. On page 166, Hancock refers to the research of Gerald Hawkins. You have to see this. I'm going to show it to you. Oh, I didn't photograph it. I can't believe that. How do you not photograph that? I'm gonna show you anyway. Yeah. 166. I haven't checked my chat in a while. All right. Oh, we're not done, guys. We got some amazing stuff to look over. We're going to look at the Nemesis ecliptic. Page 166 at the top. I believe that's it. Yeah, that's it right there. Oh, wait a minute. It's on this side. I'm sorry. Gerald Hawkins. The reason I'm showing you this is because the answer that solves all the dilemma is right here, cited by Gerald Hawkins. And Graham Hancock mentioned it and then totally ignored it. Do you see it? All right, let's see here. Share my screen again. All right. Let's see here. I don't like that one. I want the other one back. Where's my other one at? I had a better one than that. There it is. All right. So, on page 166, Hancock refers to the research of Gerald Hawkins, who published the existence of an ancient Sirius Pleiades axis in his book Beyond Stonehenge. But Hancock says no more and continues, totally unaware that he just tripped on the ancient Nemesis ecliptic zodiac before 700 BC. In his book, he literally reveals that Gerald Hawkins, who is an authority on astronomy, Gerald Hawkins is claiming that the ancients were aware and their monuments were situated to venerate a Sirius Pleiades axis, not an axis that went along with Aries through Pisces. Well, that is really interesting. And the reason it's interesting is because of this fact right here. So, one of the critical failings in Graham Hancock's entire catalog of published books is he totally ignores Nemesis theory, and that Nemesis theory is the governing theory for astronomical anomalies. A dark star being very close to a twin star, a binary, being very close and unseen to us is the reason. This is what astronomers are saying is the reason why there is perturbations in the orbits of Neptune and Uranus. This is what's causing the drag on Saturn's rings. This is why that the axis of rotation of each planet is inclined more toward the ecliptic the farther away from our sun's soul that it is. Meaning that the closest planet, Mercury, literally has a 90-degree axis and it rolls around the sun. The next planet is Venus, and Venus has a slightly inclined axis. Earth has a very inclined obliquity at 23.5 degrees. Mars does as well. Then the asteroid belt, and then we have the gas giants, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And they have weird, anomalous pulls on them. Even the moons of Jupiter and Saturn have anomalous elongated orbits, and that the prevailing theory is that there is a very large gravitational in our body that is competing with the gravitational body of Sol. And because over 50% of all the luminaries in the sky, according to the astrophysical model, are binary systems, and some of them are trinary systems, it is held by those scientists that prescribe to Nemesis theory that there is a unseen dark star, a frozen star, a collapsed star very close to our system and below it. And it is the origin of these comets with these strange elongated orbits. But I'm telling you now, it's also the origin of Earth, because we don't belong where we are. We according to the Titius-Bode law, Earth is out of place. Mercury, Venus, Mars, the asteroid belt, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune fit the mathematical distribution of worlds in proportion mathematically from the surface of the sun. Earth does not fit. It breaks the Titius-Bode perfection. If Earth is removed, the system would be complete. But Earth is an intruder, but so is the Phoenix object that appears every 138 years. So is the Nemesis X object that appears every 792 years. So is the dark star, the dark satellite, which has a strange period of 394.5 years. Our moon, Luna, was not always in the sky. Emmanuel Velikovsky, Hans Bellamy, and other researchers have divided the world's history into periods between when the moon was not there and then later when it was. They call it the capture flood. It caused a great cataclysm when the moon appeared, but it wasn't in 10,000 years ago. It was in relatively modern history within 5,500 years. So Nemesis theory accounts for this great pull. The Nemesis binary way down here is a collapsed star, but it has its own ecliptic. Our moon is a captured world. It became our moon. That's why the moon is 1/4 the size of the Earth. It is larger than any other lunar body in the entire system. All of Saturn and Jupiter's moons, it is larger than Mars' moons, be in proportion to its host body. Earth is the host. We have captured Luna, but Luna is actually planetary sized. So here we have the Nemesis binary. On the Nemesis binary, which is inclined at 60 degrees to the ecliptic, we have all the things in the sky on this disk. We have all the things in the sky that were important to the ancient world prior to 713 BC. What were they? They were Orion. They were Canis Major. They were Ursa Major. Alpha Draconis, the Eye of the Dragon, the ancient pole star, Thuban. There were the Seven Sisters, the Pleiades, Arcturus. We have an older zodiac with fewer signs, but it was on the Nemesis ecliptic. And on the Nemesis ecliptic, we had a vapor canopy world as well. So This is what solves almost all the mysteries of the ancient world. We've been dealing with one single ecliptic, Sol. But there's too much happening in the ancient world that has to be ignored by Graham Hancock, because any entertaining of Immanuel Velikovsky's work and Hans Bellamy introduces a whole nother ecliptic. A whole nother ecliptic now totally changes zodiacs, processional, all this crap that uniformitarian-minded authors like Graham Hancock have introduced into the field in order to date things at 10,000, 11,000, and 12,000 BC. Every bit of it collapses when you realize the entire sky changed because the motion of our world changed as well. The original Nemesis ecliptic is right here. The Nemesis ecliptic and the galactic Milky Way are the exact same. We have moved. Nemesis ecliptic is same as the galactic plane, Milky Way, Phoenix, dark satellite, Nemesis X. They all travel where they're supposed to travel. It's Earth that's out of place. And that's why every 138 years, Phoenix comes in proximity to Earth. Every 394.5 years, the dark satellite comes in proximity. Every 792 years, Nemesis X comes. And sometimes Nemesis X kidnaps us or becomes a fairy and moves us back onto the Nemesis X ecliptic, or pushes us off the Nemesis X ecliptic back onto Sol's ecliptic. This dance between ecliptics is what solves all the cataclysms and all the calendars of the ancient world. Here's the current ecliptic of Sol that we're on right now, the zodiac of Aries to Pisces, not known in the ancient world. Here's what we're on now. This is where we used to be. Here is where we used to be, and here's where we are today. This is just a deal about Apollo. Apollo made a deal with Gaia, and they got rid of Orion, and they brought in a new zodiac, starting with Scorpio to chase off the older zodiac of Orion. Scorpio chased off Orion, and Apollo built a whole new deal. So the whole Apollonian system started 713 BC. As a matter of fact, Apollo wasn't even really known at all in the ancient Greek world until the 8th century BC. Here's another lie of precession. Under the precessional model that Graham Hancock has adopted, he didn't invent this. Under the precessional model that he has adopted to explain his Ice Age theory and all that, they say that the original pole star, Thuban, right here, Alpha Draconis, that it takes thousands of years at 72 years per degree in the sky for our axis to actually shift and point to the new pole star Polaris. So they give these impossible zodiacal ages based off this model. The difference between Thuban, the eye of the dragon, the ancient pole star recognized by the ancients, and Polaris, the distance in time isn't thousands of years, because the pole star, because of precession of the equinox, the distance is 34.5 degrees, because in a single day the Earth moved, and when it did, its axis was pointed at a different pole star. There are no records of the transitional period. There are no monuments. There are no structures that show any time period between these being a pole star. It was from Thuban, Alpha Draconis, straight to Polaris. Just like that. The shift was instantaneous because Earth was put on a different ecliptic. The precessional model is that this took a long time. Let me show you how long it took. The precessional model shows that 72 times 34.5, 2484 years. The precessional model shows 2,484 years. That's a Phoenix number. But it wasn't an actual 2,484 years that this passed. It was done instantly. It was done 713 BC. The pole stars changed. common sense tells you that the heavens have not changed since 713 BC. How do we know? Because Polaris is still the pole star, and it's been 2,700 years since the flip. Since the year changed from 360 days to 365, since all the traditions, they changed their calendars, since the sun retrograded 10 degrees in the sky, everything was done in 713 BC. The zodiac was formulated after this. The pole star was recognized now to be Polaris by the Greeks, and it's still the pole star today, 2,700 years later. Precession is bullshit. Let's see here, y'all. Precession is just total bullshit. I found this interesting. I showed you guys this before. This is from the late 1960s Star Trek Sigma Dracona system right here. Sigma just means unknown factor. Here it is. Here are two different ecliptics being shown right here. It looks a lot like my chart. I was in prison when I drew this chart. I didn't see Star Trek. Look, I drew this chart, and when the sun darkens, when I was showing you that the historical record is literally painting us a picture that whatever this object is called Phoenix, it is passing over our ecliptic perpendicular to the ecliptic, and it's not on the ecliptic plane. And I didn't even know anything about Nemesis theory and none of that when I wrote that book. None of that. I'm just going by the historical record. Later on, the more research I did, I started drawing charts like this showing that we had two different ecliptics and what that means. Here's Titius-Bode law. Jupiter's gravity accounts for far less in the binary system model with the immense gravitational body below the sun. Here's our own ecliptic. Here is the Nemesis ecliptic. There's Vulcan, Nibiru, which is the Nemesis X object. Earth belongs on the Nemesis X ecliptic. We do not belong on Sol's ecliptic. We are out of place today. It will be corrected in 2046. Anyway, all this is in my other videos. We're not going to go into a lot. Here's more. Here's another illustration showing the different ecliptics and how they work together, and they solve all these mysteries from the ancient world. Here's the Book of Revelation showing two different ecliptics and what it means. Here's 2046 when our world is shoved back onto the Nemesis ecliptic. I know I'm not the greatest artist in the world, but you get the gist. You get the gist. Here it is. Here's the Book of Revelation again. All the timelines. Here's the book. Here's the condensed calendar when the world is put. See, you see us right there? We are put back on Nemesis ecliptic. We're no longer on Sol's ecliptic. The Book of Revelation, starting with the second trumpet, is a description of our world being moved, just like the prophecies of the Old Testament. It says that the earth will be moved out of its place. Here it is. Earth is back on, and it's now a 360 day. It's back in perfect harmony with nature. It's on the Nemesis ecliptic. We have literally made our exodus from the Sol ecliptic of Apollo, and we have re-entered the original home ecliptic of Nemesis X. It's right here. We have made our exodus, and we have returned home as a world. It changes everything about human physiology. It changes everything about our calendar. It changes our zodiac. It changes our ecliptic. It changes everything. And I opened a bunch of files. Right. Hope I'm not boring you guys. So the zodiacal cycle of precession of 25,920 years, or variously 26,000 years, it's promoted by Hancock because he simply copied the mistake from earlier writers. It's not his invention. There isn't a single historical reference to the cycle prior to 300 years ago. None. The cycle could not even exist prior to 700 BC because Earth was on the Nemesis ecliptic, and the only stars and constellations important were Orion, the Pleiades, Arcturus, Canis Major, Ursa Minor, the star Sirius, Draco, and Venus being a very prominent star in the sky. And this is reflected in the Venus almanacs. These are the important star constellations of the ancient world, not Aries, Cancer, Libra, Gemini. None of those were important. Despite the fact that the very earliest concept of precession is from 150 BC, Hipparchus of Bithynia, which is over 650 years after the 713 BC ecliptic disaster of Velikovsky, Hancock asserts without any evidence that the 26,000-year cycle was known before this and that it proves that the Great Flood was in the Ice Age. This level of ignorance and supposition is almost criminal. Where's my Velikovsky book? This is the book you should be reading, and Ages of Chaos, and Earth in Upheaval, and Mankind in Amnesia. This is the book, not Hancock. This is what you should be reading. What's crazy is that on page 185, part 4 of Fingerprints of the Gods, Graham Hancock titled his chapter, A Species with Amnesia. This is a dart thrown directly at Immanuel Velikovsky. It's a proverbial FU. Velikovsky wrote Mankind in Amnesia, and the topic of the book is about world cataclysms and the psychological effect on the human psyche. Hancock is well aware of the books of Immanuel Velikovsky, but he also knows they totally collapse all his Younger Dryas model BS, his dating of the Great Flood, dating of Atlantis, the fall of an advanced civilization, all his evidence, all his pushing the precession phenomenon and the zodiac to date all these things is all killed in Immanuel Velikovsky, because Velikovsky shows that our sun has changed directions because the world has been moved out of its place at least 4 times. And this completely kills all archaeoastronomy, all zodiac dating, every bit of it. This is why Graham Hancock cannot mention Immanuel Velikovsky. But he sure threw a dart at him. Species with Amnesia. Now, that's a direct reference to Immanuel Velikovsky, while also basically saying F you. 713 file. I've already shown that. So, not only does Graham Hancock know nothing about ancient calendar systems, but he is clueless about the true significance of the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx. Hancock, he relies on Robert Bauval's astronomical research to conclude that the Sphinx may date to 10,450 BC. But Robert Bauval ignores all of Velikovsky and ancient writings that describe the heavens have changed. The same thing Hancock ignores, Robert Bauval ignores as well. That the sun moved in another direction completely kills the research of Robert Bauval. Hancock relies on Robert Schoch, a geologist who claims that the damage of the Sphinx had been from weathering at a time when the climate was wetter. A total assumption by a uniformitarian. But the water damage of the Sphinx is the same as the water damage of the Great Pyramid. I know you guys know about this. Look at this. Here's the Great Pyramid. Look at the erosion right here. This is called severe karst erosion right here. All this is erosion because water. This was all submerged underwater. But look at the erosion here in the center. This is the water line. This is because of wave action. This is the Mediterranean wave action that caused this. This is the area of most destruction. Look at this. The casing stones of the Great Pyramid are still intact up here. Why? Because it wasn't underwater. This part wasn't underwater. Is this the reason a lot of people dismiss the Great Pyramid as being underwater is because they believe that it means the whole world must have been underwater because the Great Pyramid is 481 feet high. But you can see the wave crest right here. It wasn't. It was submerged 300 feet in the Mediterranean. But it doesn't mean the whole world flooded because that's not what happened. In the Archaix research, I show the traditions, the archaeology, everything you need to see to understand that in 2239 BC, in the month of May, the entire North African plate suffered an earthquake. In that earthquake, the entire North African plate sank 300 feet. Concerning the size of continents, 300 feet elevation or subsidence is nothing. It's nothing. But it was enough to put the Delta region in the Sahara Desert under the Mediterranean. Put it down. It shoved it down. 340 years later, in the year 1899 BC, all of a sudden an earthquake, just happened to be the exact year of the Dark Satellite passage as well. But an earthquake reversed the subsidence, and now the North African plate goes right back to its original position, creating the Egyptian Delta. It's created. The whole entire North Africa drains, leaving behind the Sahara Desert. Every bit of this. Hancock claims the Sphinx is evidence that the cataclysm celebrated in the Egyptian traditions was an ice age, claiming the age of Leo, that the Sphinx was the dog Anubis. All of this is complete poppycock. It's total BS. If 340 years of submersion in the Mediterranean could damage the Great Pyramid to look like this, what do you think total submersion in the currents of the Mediterranean would do to the soft sandstone of the Sphinx? It wasn't protected encasing blocks. It wasn't hardened sandstone blocks that were poured in molds like the Great Pyramid. It was a natural sandstone outcrop that had been carved into the visage of a gigantic dog, Canis Major, later known in Egypt as Anubis. But the dog was destroyed in underwater for 340 years while the pyramid was taking a beating from the waves. Professor Waddell has the revised, corrected Egyptian chronology. This area of Egypt wasn't even inhabited until after 1899 BC when this happened. In fact, the oldest known name for this region of Egypt in 1800 BC was called the Raised Land. That's the name of ancient Egypt, the Raised Land. Not Waset, not Kemet, not Kemishia to the south, where you have Thebes and Karnak and the Valley of the Kings. I'm talking about only where the pyramids are in northern Egypt, 450 miles away from southern Egypt, where the pharaohs were sitting in the Valley of the Kings, where we have these great Egyptian cities of Karnak and Waset and Thebes. They're not in the north. Those are all in the south, 450 miles distance with nothing but desert between them. In the north are 139, 140 something pyramids. They were underwater. Hancock spends almost 50 pages spread throughout this book, Fingerprints of the Gods, showing advanced arithmetic of the Great Pyramid, all of it borrowed from researchers and books before him. And while it does impress those who have never seen this material before, every bit of it has been published for over 100 years. There's nothing new in Fingerprints of the Gods. Excuse me. He never mentions the great pyramidologists. He never mentions Frederick Norden Lewis. He never mentions Charles Piazzi Smith, John Taylor, Robert Menzies, Adam Rutherford, David Davidson. Now, Graham Hancock has a real bad habit of not mentioning all the giants before him. So, yeah, it's crazy. Over 50 pages of nothing but pyramid data as if it promotes his thesis, and it does not. It does not add to his thesis at all. It's just filler. He just put a whole bunch of random stuff about the Great Pyramid. It's almost like Billy Carson packing his books with a bunch of filler, but there's no point. There's no point being made. It's just a whole bunch of filler, trying to show somehow that the numbers of the pyramid are in some way processional and not sexagesimal. So on page 444, Hancock relates that an advanced computer program plotted the processional induced changes they entered into the model, and their program showed them that the stars in the heavens matched the pattern of the Great Pyramids of Giza only in the year 10,450 BC. But we know that's impossible. Again, no computer simulations can show the sky as it looked before 713 BC because the world moved. The entire stellosphere shifted. No computer simulations, no archaeoastronomy. You can throw all that trash right on out the window. Hancock draws comparisons between the pyramids of Teotihuacan in Mexico and those of Giza, Egypt. Guys, there is no comparison. There's no comparison. There is no comparison between this structure and the pyramids of Mexico. I'm not denigrating the Mexicans, but it's totally different. This structure is 481. Well, with the capstone, it'll be 481, but it's 454 feet high. However, it's 203 courses of precision set stone with tolerances that are 0.25%. Smoother than the marble on a bank building, with an adhesive stronger, of unknown composition, stronger than the actual blocks themselves, that fuses all 2.3 million blocks into one single structure. It is mathematically precise. The measurements are self-referencing. I've shown this over and over in my presentations. We're not going to go into it, but the pyramids in Mexico are different. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan is actually 4 or 5 more ancient structures that all collapsed, and they're flattened out, limed over, faced, and then put facing blocks on top of them, and it looks like a very impressive pyramid, but it's got 4 substructures of previous pyramids that were smaller and smaller and smaller in temples. That's not the same. Building a structure of filler. It's just filler, blocks from different time periods, different materials. The Great Pyramid is a solid construction all the way through that is still standing after 5,000 years. None of the pyramids in Mexico can boast that. Many of them were rebuilt. Nor do they have upper grand galleries. Only the Great Pyramid has upper grand gallery, king's chamber, queen's chamber, all that. All the pyramids in Mexico have subterranean chambers that mirror the Great Pyramid, but they didn't know about the ascendant chambers. They weren't discovered till 820 AD, after the Pyramid Age was pretty much over. I mean, we have too much. We have too much information. You know, Frederick Norton Lewis, he discovered seashells everywhere. We know that fossils have been found on the lower courses of the Great Pyramid. Salt crystals were encrusted inside the Great Pyramid because it was under the Mediterranean. Egypt was called the raised land because it raised up out of the sea. This is all done. This is all established, and Hancock needs to educate himself on the chronology of Professor Waddell, instead of using all these bogus Egyptological chronologies that are based off uniformitarianism. So the traditions of the Egyptian Copts, the Jews, the Christians, the Arabians themselves all placed the Great Pyramid before the Great Flood. And the Great Flood was the collapse of the vapor canopy, 2239 BC. In that collapse of the vapor canopy, the world was being destroyed by earthquakes at the same time. One of those earthquakes dropped the entire North African plate 300 feet. This is what caused the damage to the Sphinx. Rainfall for 10,000 years in a climate different than a desert is not what damaged the Sphinx. Robert Schoch may be a geologist, but he's also a uniformitarian, and he has been brainwashed into all the uniformitarian dogma. Uniformitarian science is a religion just like Christianity. So different. So different. The earliest depictions of the Sphinx and in traditions like the Aztecs and the Toltecs, they held it was a great dog. It was a dog that guarded the sacred mountains, and the sacred mountains were positioned at a place called the Nine Rivers. That's the Delta. This is Aztec mythology. I've cited this on my channel. So Anubis wasn't a lion. Anubis was a dog, guarded the gate to the underworld. This is the traditions of the Great Pyramid, that it is a portal guarding the underworld, the escape from this experience. The Sphinx we have today, and you'll have to watch my other presentations, but the Sphinx we have today has been altered because the ruinous Sphinx, the head of Anubis, is gone. 340 years underneath the currents of the Mediterranean softened the limestone and sandstone and it just totally destroyed the Sphinx. So they carved a human face with a headdress into the width of the neck stump that was left. This is why all the aerial photos show the Sphinx to be altered. The head is a tiny pimple. It is disproportionate to the body, because at one time the head was 30 feet higher. It was they took the neck stump and carved a face and put a headdress on it. And this is why a lot of it's hard to see from the pictures in books, because they always try to show the camera angle where the head looks big. But when you see it from drone photos above, the head is tiny and the body's huge. It's because some pharaoh after the cataclysm carved that human face with a pharaoh headdress, but it was originally the face of a dog. So also, Graham Hancock's book, Fingerprints of the Gods, he makes a real big deal out of the 1530 AD Piri Reis map. It shows Antarctica according to the U.S. Air Force. Let me show. I got these maps. Let's look at these maps. I don't know if I have the Piri Reis, but we got several maps here. Well, we got a few. I'm going to show a few maps. This one's not. This is the Bosch map. He also shows this in his book. But these maps, they show Antarctica prior to having ice. Hancock wants the reader to believe that these maps are copies of 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 copies that go back 11,000 years to the Ice Age, before there was ice in Antarctica. The suspension of disbelief required for that assertion is mind-boggling. If you're willing to believe that, you need to keep reading Hancock and you need to keep giving him your money if you're willing to believe that crap. Hancock uses uniformitarian models and dating of ice ages, which are still entirely theoretical. However, Hancock also dismisses these same scientists who assert that no advanced civilizations existed 10,000 BC. This is cherry picking. Hancock has shown no evidence of any advanced civilizations prior to 4000 BC, but he wants you to believe that fragile maps have been copied over and 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 over until modern times in the last 500 years, when we've discovered the age of these maps to be, that show an ice-free Antarctic, coastlines, interior, mountains, valleys. Those civilizations themselves haven't left a trace of their cities, but we have paper maps of copies of copies of copies of copies of copies. This is what he's asking you to believe. Most people can't get past this hurdle because they've accepted the uniformitarian establishment bullshit of ice ages. But it doesn't snow hardly at all at the poles, the Antarctic and the Arctic. About a half an inch a year is the amount of snow, not enough to create 2-mile-high ice caps at the north and the south. So if it's not snowing, and it's not over a large period of time that these are created, then it must be suddenly. Some type of mechanism exists suddenly that takes away all the 2-mile-high ice caps, allowing us to map them. And then something else happens that causes the 2-mile high ice caps in an area that's so arid it doesn't snow, to create 2-mile high ice caps. What is this mechanism that's going back and forth? Because we cannot accept, no intelligent trier of fact will ever be able to accept that paper maps dated 500 years ago are copies of copies of copies of copies of copies of ice-free Antarctica, when Antarctica, according to that model, was only ice-free 15, 16, 17, 18,000 years ago, before the Ice Age. It's dumb. It's so stupid. What's easier to believe, following Occam's razor, is that these 500-year-old maps, here's another one. These 500-year-old maps, no, this is the Mercator map showing that by the 1560s, the ice was there. Here's an older map. Antarctica hasn't. Here it is right here. The Orontius Phineas map showing Antarctica with ice-free coasts, mountains, and rivers. Okay, guys. This is a problem. Graham Hancock can't have it both ways. He borrows freely from the scientific model of ice ages, while the entire scientific community dismisses Hancock's theories as bogus. He cites these maps as evidence that an advanced civilization before the Ice Age mapped out Antarctica. This would be 15,000, 16,000, 17,000 BC. This is what he's trying to get you to believe, rather than 600 years ago Antarctica wasn't covered in ice and we mapped it. That's the more plausible scenario, because there is a mechanism that can undo that. One of them is vapor canopy mechanics. I've got 5 videos on vapor canopies. It's not something theoretical. There are 4 different scientific books that I've cited in Archaix that show all the research on vapor canopy techniques. When a vapor canopy collapses, the world's no longer warm. Animals aren't growing large anymore. Plants aren't growing large. Humans aren't growing large and living for long periods of time. The vapor canopy collapses and the sun is born. And in the Americas, we have the water sun. The sun is just now born, just like Utu Shamash, just like Horus. The sun is born. It's the first age. Then we have the earth sun, earthquakes. We have the son of the giants, the 4 ages of the suns, all the way to the stone of the 5th sun, is all because of the return and the collapse of vapor canopies. This is the history of the world. The Orontius Phineas map of ice-free Antarctica, according to Hancock, is proof that men lived in Antarctica and that the maps were from older copies of very extreme antiquity. He refuses to admit that Antarctica could have been ice-free very recently, because he knows the scientific community, holding to their Ice Age fantasy, would never, ever allow for that interpretation. Hancock claims that Antarctica was ice-free and mapped when Antarctica was at a different location and is presently in its position in South Pole due to crustal slippage. This hypocrisy is exposed because Hancock also shows that the Bosch map of 1737 clearly shows Antarctica exactly where we find it today, ice-free. Do you understand the hypocrisy here? Out of one side of his mouth, he claims that Antarctica was ice-free because it was in a different position. Then he turns around and shows the Bosch map, which shows Antarctica in the exact position that we have it today, free of ice. Hancock, again, relies on the uniformitarian scientific model, even though all scientists dismiss Hancock as a fiction writer. He uses fact that extinct species of animals are found in art of ancient ruins and uses this to claim that these ruins in the Americas must date to the last ice age. At the same time, Let's see. At the same time, Hancock ignores many discoveries of figurines, statuary, artwork, petroglyphs, and Indian totem poles that show humans battling pterodactyls, riding stegosaurus, hunting brontosaurus, being picked up by gigantic winged creatures. You remember the Acambaro 35,000 figurines found in Mexico? Listen, guys, this is cherry picking and complete hypocrisy. Megafauna remains have been found in the Mississippi mound builder ruins among human skeletons. Pipes and spears shaped like megafauna are in North and Central South America, and they're dated 2,000 years old. Hancock borrows heavily from the uniformitarian Ice Age model, quoting Darwinian propaganda, and asserts that the sudden quick freezing of the world was between 13,000 and 12,000 years ago that encased the North and South in ice. Ice ages are still, how ice ages are formed is still entirely theoretical. No one knows. Scientists have never been able to agree how those 2-mile ice caps got there because the poles are arid. They are not humid. This is why in 365 days a year, only half an inch of snow ever falls. So there's no way to account for 2-mile-high ice caps. There's another mechanism involved. It's not Ice Age. So I know it's vapor canopy collapsing, but it's okay. That's where all the moisture from the vapor canopy goes. And when the vapor canopy returns, it comes from the poles. The cataclysm that froze the megafauna was the Typhon flood that was known for intense volcanic eruptions as the canopy collapsed. Remarkably, Hancock mentions on page 216 that volcanic ash is found in Ice Age deposits. Yeah, those deposits are actually 23rd century BC. So Graham Hancock bridges the Ice Age destruction, the Great Cold Collapse, the earthquakes and dying off of animals to the traditions of the Great Flood, stories known all over the world, but the two events are the same. This is a difference in time of 9,000 years. Hancock has zero evidence that a Younger Dryas destruction has anything to do with the Great Deluge of human memory, which by every species of chronological data points is dated to the 23rd century BC and backed up with solid anthropological, archaeological, climatological, and geological proofs. I would love to debate anybody qualified who believes that the Great Flood of biblical fame is any other time than the 23rd century BC. I will overwhelm them with data. The Great Flood was 2239 BC, and this can be shown from many different chronological vantage points. The vapor canopy collapsed, causing the Great Deluge, and the poles froze. In fact, episode 4 of Archaix 4.0 is about this cataclysm and all the chronological facts that put it in the month of May 2239 BC. So guys, the conclusion here is that Graham Hancock is a pure establishment plant. His books are for those who are still clinging to the false world of the uniformitarian model, but catastrophism is misdated and unsupported with facts. Hancock's research is specifically designed to corral those seeking the truth from the scientific model and lead them into another false rabbit hole that conforms more to their liking, the exchange of one lie for another. I'm telling you guys, from Atlantis, Younger Dryas, Precession, zodiacal dating, misquoting ancient historians on moon count systems, every bit of it, especially misquoting Herodotus on the 4 times that the sun changed direction and then trying to hide the rest of what Herodotus actually said about that. Every bit of this is evidence of willful deceit. These are not mistakes. These are not mistakes. Not mentioning writers like Thor Heyerdahl. You know, he cites Thor Heyerdahl, but in Fingerprints of the Gods, he cites a fact from one of Thor Heyerdahl's books, but he doesn't mention Thor Heyerdahl in the text. You have to go into the bibliography. So Thor Heyerdahl was a Sumerologist as well. He accurately shows all kinds of amazing things that Graham Hancock just ignores in Fingerprints of the Gods. But it's worse with Immanuel Velikovsky, because the catastrophist research of Immanuel Velikovsky undermines and overthrows Graham Hancock's entire thesis. So I'm telling you now, if Archaix had the funding to show advanced CGI documentaries with all my research and data points, data sets, all my imagery, everything like Graham Hancock has had access to from the very beginning of his professional career, all these other people, these massive establishment channels, these awesome videos they're able to do. If I had a graphics package that could put all that together and show you the whole Nemesis model, the whole Phoenix model, the whole Archaix model of the history of the world and all the facts that go with it, it would blow people's minds. We'd put the historic record together fast and so compelling with sources that there would be no arguments. It would be a shut book case. If people had access to a docuseries directed and written by Archaix, it would blow people's minds to see exactly what knowledge we actually do possess. Yeah, so if there's any millionaires out there who want to make that happen, get with me. Yeah, my email's on my channel. Always. Yeah, we got any millionaires out there that want to put these guys in their place, because they're all going to ignore me, or none of them want to debate these things. So yeah, any millionaires out there, hit me up. Let's make this happen. Let's put the Archaix history of the world to a badass docuseries that will completely rival all that drivel in ancient apocalypse. I'm ready, guys. I'm ready to do that anytime you want to. And I'm also ready to quit showing this shill book here. That's exactly what it is. 3 hours and 10 minutes. It didn't even feel like that. Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow. All right, guys. That's my presentation. I'm probably not done with Graham Hancock. I may look into Randall Carlson next. They're all involved. They're all in on it. Every one of them. But yeah, it's amazing the data that we do possess. It's amazing what people believe that just simply isn't true. It's crazy. It's just crazy. So I'm gonna show my ad and I'm gonna go ahead and make my exit. That's a long video. Mr. Hancock, you're more than willing to come on my channel. Jimmy Corsetti, you're more than willing to come on my channel. Randall Carlson, you're more than willing to come on my channel, and you can try to baffle my community with bullshit, but they're more educated than you think. And I'll probably listen tongue in cheek, and then when you finally get quiet, I will proceed to dismantling that BS, because that's what I do. But you're more than welcome to give it a try. I'm not going to stop you from coming on my channel. Where is that? So we got a errant ad here. There he is. Yeah, I like this. I like it when people take bookmaking to a whole new level. It's an art. Man, what a cool little ad. Cool little ad. All right, so our next video, a couple days from now, you guys know Archaix 4.0, episode 3, the Ogaigian Apocalypse. 552 years after the previous video, which was 1135 BC destruction of Atlantis, and which was 552 years after the 583 BC prediction of the sun darkening by Thales of Miletus. That's where we're going. All right. Thank you for the donations, guys. Thank you for hanging with me. It's sad too, because this is the first live video I've done where I didn't crack 1,000, probably in 3 years. I've gotten as many as like 3,500 people in live chat, but it kind of goes to show you that a lot of people just aren't interested in Graham Hancock anymore. And I get that. I get that for real. All right, guys, share this video, put it out there on social media, put it on Facebook, Reddit, put it everywhere. I'm not done with Graham Hancock. That's just one book. That's just one book, guys. One book. All right, let's see. What am I going to play? Here it is. You know what? He did such a good job. Let's just continue with him. I'm going to sign out. Love you guys.
And struck Atlantis down. So Solon said to the priests, okay, when did this happen? And they said, quite matter-of-factly, 9,000 years ago. That's in 600 BC. Do the math. That's a date in our calendar. That's 9,600 BC. That's 11,600 years ago.
Why don't you mention about that particular date, 11,600?
Well, it's incredibly important. It's an incredibly important date because the Younger Dryas begins 12,800 years ago with a cataclysm, with a puzzling, mysterious rise in sea level at the same point, 1,000 years of freezing temperatures, mass extinctions of animal species all over the world, and then 11,600 years ago, global temperature shoots up. The last of the ice caps collapse into the sea. Sea level rises enormously. That is the date that work starts at Göbekli Tepe, and it's a point I've made many times, but it's really worth making because archaeologists roll their eyes every time you say the word Atlantis. But that is precisely the date that Plato, which is the earliest surviving reference to Atlantis, that's precisely the date he gives for the destruction of Atlantis. And as we look into it further, we find something else, that Plato puts a date on the destruction of Atlantis. He says Atlantis was submerged beneath the waves in a huge global cataclysm 9,000 years before the time of Solon. That gives us an absolute date for this. Then Solon asks, when did this happen? And the priests say, they're very relaxed about it. They say, 9,000 years ago. So immediately we have a date that we can put to our calendar. 600 BC, he makes the visit. 9,000 years before that, that's 9,600 BC. Give or take 23 years, that is 11,600 years ago. That's when Göbekli Tepe is built. That's when Meltwater Pulse 1b begins to flood the world oceans. And again, my critics will niggle away at the edges of this and say, well, Meltwater Pulse 1b unfolded over 300 or 400 years. If you average it out, it wasn't that much in any one year. But who says it happened at average rates? Who says there wasn't a big rise and then a smaller rise? Yeah. These things are very annoying. So Solon said to the priests, okay, when did this happen? And they said, quite matter-of-factly, 9,000 years ago. Quite matter-of-factly, 9,000 years ago. 9,000 years ago. Plato repeatedly states that it is a true story. And as we look into it further, we find something else, that Plato puts a date on the destruction of Atlantis. He says Atlantis was submerged beneath the waves in a huge global cataclysm 9,000 years before the time of Solon. And Solon asked those Egyptian priests, when did this happen? And they said, 9,000 years ago. Well, do the math. That's in 600 BC. That's 9,000 years before 600 BC. We call that 9,600 BC. That's 11,600 years ago. That's exactly the date of the end of the Younger Dryas, and it's exactly the date of what is called Meltwater Pulse 1b, one of the biggest single rises overnight in sea level that ever occurred. So if Plato made it up, it's really weird that he picked a date that is precisely a date that coincides with the latest geological evidence on cataclysmic sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age. Plato is the earliest surviving reference we have to this great lost civilization of prehistory that he referred to as Atlantis. The source, the earliest surviving source for the tradition of Atlantis, is the highly respected figure of Plato. And he passes it down to us in dialogues called the Timaeus and the Critias.